You're live on YouTube, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Amanda. So welcome to House Transportation, Highways and Military Affairs Committee. We have 4 bills up today. In my list. Finish House Bill 24, which we started the last time we met. Take up House Bill 26, the fuel tax bill. House Bill 22, military code revisions. And if time permits, House Bill 71, Mountain Standard Time. And that, I remind everyone to please keep the decorum, please address the chair. I will expect people are respectful and that of each other, respectful of time. We have 3 substantial bills to consider, and I would tell you I plan to get those done in the allotted time. So good targeted comments and questions are welcome. I would like to have a clean desk and that by next week when we start in person in Cheyenne. So any questions or anything before we start? Okay, Amanda, would you take roll?
Representative Baker?
Here.
Representative Brown?
Here.
Representative Burt?
Here.
Representative Henderson?
Here.
Representative McGuire?
Present.
Representative Obermueller?
Here.
Representative O'Hearn?
Here.
Representative Stybar?
Present.
Chairman Burkhart?
Here.
Thank you.
And I figure we have a quorum, correct?
Yes.
All right. So we'll take up House Bill 24 where we left off last time, and I think we had concluded the agency testimony. And on my notes, I had that. Let's see. Give me a moment. Who did we have up? Well, I do have notes. Give me a minute. I think we'll just start with that public testimony if those people are there. How many people do we have in the waiting room, Amanda?
Mr. Chairman, we have YDOT, and then we have 2 with their hands raised that have been entered into the webinar as panelists to be able to speak.
Okay, who are those 2, please?
Mr. Chairman, Jim Willox and Kelly Little.
Okay, because I think Kelly was on the last time, and I think we had Brent Moline on also, and he's obviously not in the room. So with that, because we've concluded the agency testimony and I opened it for public comment, I think we'll just go to Ms. Little first.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I'm also joined today by Converse County Commissioner Jim Willox, who is the WCCA president. The WCCA supports this bill. We appreciate YDOT bringing a solution to the legislature to solve this conundrum of replacing the revenue information system. As far as the counties go, the counties do use the system in different ways in every county. The clerks and the treasurers have access to it, but the way that they use it and the systems that they use are different in every county. So we would just like to have that reminder to the committee. If it pleases the chair, I will turn it over to President Willox to talk about more of our position. And I'd be happy to answer any questions as far as the WCCA is concerned. So if that pleases the chairman, we could do that.
Okay, just a moment. Brent, just do you mind waiting? You would have been next up, but I guess we've allowed the county commissioners to come in. So would you mind waiting till after Commissioner Willox is done?
Mr. Chairman, I'm here for the duration, so you just let me know when you want me.
Okay, Mr. Lane, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Willox, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you trying to keep the order from the last time. I'll be brief. As Kelly did point out, we do support this bill. Unfortunately has a fee attached to it, but that seems about the only way that we're going to be able to get this done. This is a critical component of what you heard from the director previously, the YDOT system, but also a critical important for the counties to do the duties of the state at the local level, which include helping manage some of those fees and collecting those fees, and also having the correct information when titling and other things like that. This is a can that's been kicked down the road. It's dented, it's beat up, it's rusting, and it's made out of cobalt. That's my coding reference, and that is not a system that is sustainable for us. So just want to express that we are supportive of it, realize that we will be the agencies collecting the fees at the local level and distributing them where appropriate and where willing to be engaged in that. But we do support this bill and getting that system modernized so that it does not fail at an inopportune time. And with that, Mr. Chairman, Kelly and I'd stand for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Little or Mr. Willicks? Okay, nope. With that, I'll go to Mr. Moline. Brent, please.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. I'm expressing a little bit of frustration with this bill. I realize we need to do something, but this has been a problem we've known about. I've lobbied for 15 years and we've known about it. And I guess finally we're going to try to do something about it. But about the fee increase, maybe to a lot of, like me personally, it's not going to be that much money. I own 4 vehicles, but some of my members that own several large trucks, granted it's only $5 a vehicle, but we're talking, some of them is going to be $100 to $150 a year. To some people, that's not much money, but to my members, every penny counts. If this bill should go forward, right now it says the governor may repeal it. I don't know if I've got that words correctly phrased or not, but what I would like to see is, should this bill go forward, a sunset date put on it. And I appreciate that the YDOT's going to have to report back to this committee, but I would like to see a 4-year sunset date on it, that which can always be easily extended. That's been done in this legislature many, many times during my tenure with Farm Bureau. But if we put a 4-year sunset date on it, which again can be extended, when the sunset day is coming due, but that allows you folks to keep an eye on YDOT. Is it working? Is it going the correct way? And if it's not, that gives you the ability to pull it back and find some other type of solution rather than increasing the fees to the citizens of Wyoming. With that, Mr. Chairman, strongly not in favor of the bill, but strongly supporting at least putting a 4-year sunset date on this bill so that the committee can keep an eye on it, the legislature can keep an eye on what's going on. If it's working, easily extended. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd sit for any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Moline? Any questions? Okay, I apologize. I have to look at a screen and see if anybody has their hand raised. So, okay, Mr. Moline, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for this opportunity. I wish we were face to face, but this is the way the card's been dealt. So it's what we got to do, and I guess we're making it work. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, right. Amanda, anyone else out there wishing to provide public testimony?
Mr. Chairman, we have one with their raised hand in the webinar as a panelist. Brian?
Yes, please submit Mr. Odekoven. Mr. Odekoven, good to see you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, rising to provide a perspective, if you will, from the law enforcement angle on our critical desire to have the computer improved and to maintain its integrity. This computer and the system that surround it is where we, during a traffic stop, learn the information of the vehicle, learn the information of the driver, learn the whole background of the driver, the whole driving history, whether they have a valid driver's license. All of those kinds of questions reside on this computer. So it's a very integral process or integral piece of the process of traffic enforcement or enforcing laws across the state. So I think, as Mr. Moline mentioned, this computer has been a suspect at best on its longevity, and it is a surprise to many that it's still alive and well, given the technology that it has and certainly the need for the replacement. One of these days it will crash, and I'm not real sure what we will do at that point. So having a system and a plan to be able to provide that progression of replacement would be reasonable and prudent, our opinion, Mr. Chairman. So I would like to see something in place to provide that replacement of this very much needed piece of equipment. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Odekoven. Any questions for Mr. Odekoven? I do then. Mr. Odekoven, if the system goes down, what does that directly mean to law enforcement?
Mr. Chairman, so we would have information locally, if you will, but we would not have information from the state system. So we should, excuse me, I apologize. I thought I had that noise shut off. Now I do. So we would have access to local information. So we could find out the vehicle registration information locally, but we would not be able to find out any vehicle information from any other county in the state, because we rely on coming through the state computer system to be able to do that. Same with, we would have limited driver's license or insurance information, only that if we had previous contact with the person and we maintained that information within the system locally. So we would be relying on a state computer for all other driver's license or vehicle inquiries. So that would be very difficult for us to ensure that everything is following the law without having that computer in place.
So Mr. Odekoven, another question similar. So if the person, say, was stopped at a traffic stop and the officer just suspected something was amiss for some reason, and the person was from out of state, it would almost be impossible then to get any information on them if they've never been in the local system?
Mr. Chairman, we rely on a different system to garner information out of state. This would be for all counties within state.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Odekoven? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Odekoven, very much.
Thank you, sir.
Amanda, anyone else?
Not that I'm seeing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, then I will close public testimony. Committee?
Chairman, move the bill.
Okay. Moved by Brown. Is there a second? Second by O'Hearn. All right. So I think the bill is pretty straightforward. The majority of it is changes in the fees. So I don't think we need to go through it page by page unless somebody wants to. I guess I'll ask if anyone has any amendments to the bill. Any amendments? Okay. Then I have one, and Amanda, if you could bring that up. And I will, it's easier to explain the amendment than try to go through it. It's a long amendment. So yeah, Amanda will bring that up on the screen. And I'll just give you a rundown of what the amendment does. There's a lot of words here, and it was needed because of the way the original bill was written. What this bill does is it puts a sunset date on the appropriations, on the money. It reduces from $5 to $2.50 the additional fee on driver's license and vehicle registration. It requires a amount of money to come out of severance tax and FMRs, federal mineral royalties, currently going to YDOT in the amount of $2 million a year out of the severance tax, and $3 million out of FMRs. It requires that other agencies, the department will calculate their contribution to the system based on their usage, and that percentage of use will be allocated against a number that was picked just as a starting point, but I think a reasonable point of $1 million. So if they use it 3% of the time, they owe $30,000 into the system on an annual basis to do this work. Additionally, then it also pulls money back from highway funds that currently go to state parks to put to the system, again, for 5 years. And in the end, says that if we get COVID money on the next stimulus package from the federal government, all that money that the department can get from those funds, those stimulus funds or relief funds, can be used to offset this, and everything sunsets in 5 years. So that's the gist of the bill. If I can get a second. Seconded by Brown. Okay, any discussion on the amendment, rather? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's honestly a pleasure to have an ex-appropriator on the committee to really finagle some of this as we move through here. So I like the intent of this. I have a couple of questions. My first question being, are we ultimately trying to rob Peter to pay Paul by directing and redirecting FMRs and some of our other revenue streams that are going into YDOT? Are we taking money off of the roads and diverting that straight to only this? And is that going to impact our roads? So that'll be my first question, Mr. Chairman.
So Representative Brown, my answer would be yes. We are taking money right now in this from the roads. And if you look at just FMRs at $3 million a year over 5 years, that's 15 million. That's 15 miles of road that will not get repaired. I feel that the system is critical enough that we can make that decision if we want, that says we are finding this critical enough in a critical enough situation that we need to do that at this time. And that's about the only way we can do it without putting the burden on the drivers of Wyoming completely, which I really don't think we should do now for a system that is pretty much a statewide system with lots of usage by other agencies, such as workforce services, family services, and all of those.
Mr. Chairman, follow up. And actually, this is probably a more global question, but is there any way we can get this emailed to us so we can see the entirety of the amendment? Yes,
Representative Brown. Amanda, if you would go ahead and do that, email it to all the members, please. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you to do that to start with. I apologize. The members.
Like it was just sent.
Mr. Chairman, I sent it to them.
Okay. All right. Representative Brown, anything else right now?
Not right now. I'll go read through this, and I'll probably have some before we go to a vote.
Okay. Representative Obermiller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not inclined to favor this amendment. At some point, we have to declare that $5 really isn't that much money and doesn't break anybody. You know, there's a difference between complaining about fees and not being able to afford the fees. And we have to make that distinction at some point. The bill with the $5 increase is very simple to understand. People can afford it even though they may not like it. And we have to pay for this somehow. They've worked all kinds of angles to try to get at this for a long time. here's a simple solution. I think this amendment creates a level of complexity to it that's going to make it very difficult to sell. And so I like the original version of the bill, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Chairman. I like the amendment. You got to remember House Bill 218 and 219 of the 2017 session. We've already raised the fees for driver's license and registration. I think it's a good amendment, and I will support it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Anyone else? Representative Brown.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think you've done a good enough job explaining it. I'm inclined, I'm about a 50-50 split on the intentions of this bill or the amendment. I tend to agree with Representative Obermuller on the $5, keeping in mind what Representative Stibar just mentioned, that we did just raise these. That is true. It was also the first time since 1977 that we had done so. So we really haven't done much of an adjustment to our fee structure for what the people of the state of Wyoming use. We have not adjusted what they pay. So I tend to agree with Representative Obermuller on that portion. But that being said, I kind of like the idea of the diversion of FMRs. I think it's kind of an interesting concept to bring forward and say, you know, if this is truly that critical, we will figure out a way to find a way to plug that $3 million in. And when you put it in the term of mileage, 15 miles of road, I think that's actually not a horrible thing to do. I would ask, I'm having a hard time getting my amendment to pull up because I've got a problem with Acrobat, but I guess my question here, Mr. Chairman, as I look at the rest of this, my true question is do you truly feel, as you're bringing this forward from a $5 to a $2.50 deal, that $2.50 savings to the average driver across the state with their license plate or anything like that is going to make or break their bank? And if so, that $2.50, how much does that equate to if we were to keep that at a $5 fee? And how much are we losing there? Because maybe we look at combining these two, doing the diversions as well as a full $5. That might get us there a little bit quicker.
Representative, I can't speak for, other people's finances and that. I guess right now I know that a lot of people are hurting and, a little bit of money can make a real difference to them. If you look at the fiscal note, changing from $5 to $2.50 results in merely all of the additional monies there being cut in half, roughly. And that was why the other sources of funding, you can always offer an amendment to the amendment if you so choose. And that the other thing is a five, so it'll change a little bit because of the proposed 5-year sunset date on everything. So it would decrease it a little bit. I did a rough calculation the other day, and I think my estimate was all of this over 5 years would net out to be somewhere between 50 and 60 million. So that was
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Brown.
I do appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. So thank you with that. I guess I do have a quick question, and this would probably be for Taylor Rossetti. And I'm having a hard time trying to remember this, but we did, when we adjusted the fee, I believe that we also adjusted the time frame from 4 years to 5 years for renewals. And I just wanted to make sure that that was accurately reflected in the $830,000 in the fiscal note being, that's what we expect to renew, because I know we haven't hit that 5-year mark. So if I could get that question answered from the department, that would help me with making sure that everything is good here.
Mr. Rossetti, I see that you're on. If you could answer that question, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Representative Brown, you are correct. At the time that those fees were adjusted and the general funds were pulled back in like amount, we also did extend the driver's license period from 4 years to 5.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rossetti. So that was also the reason, committee, that the 5-year sunset date. Everyone pays it once for their driver's license, but then anybody with a vehicle will pay it every year on renewal. Representative Brown, follow up?
Yeah, one last follow up here, Mr. Chairman. If I look into section 3 on page 6, lines 21 of your 21 through 30 of the amendment, one of the concerns that I have with this, I like what you're talking about and asking to look at historical usage, but it's each agency and political subdivision of the state using this. My concern with that is we also have a lot of third-party vendors that are not political subdivisions and or state agencies that are using this. And I'm curious if maybe we could hear, or I know that spaghetti chart at one point, that spider chart had a whole bunch of those. Was it your intention to encompass those as well? Or are we looking at just charging these agencies that are collecting in on this? Or were we trying to encapsulate everybody who uses this?
Representative Brown, right now it was the agencies. The other groups, the third parties that use it, do pay a fee. And just as a quick side note, I think those fees are too low. However, changing those fees is beyond the scope of this bill, and we would need to look at another bill. And I think that's something to come up in the interim, is to look at all the fees. I think most of them are relatively low. Some of them haven't been raised back into the 80s and I think we need to bring them up to current amounts. Okay. See who had their hand up. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little gentle pushback on the comment that this is just a $5 increase on our license fees for our vehicles. I can speak personally on mine. I own a 2003, almost, we're looking at a 17, 18-year-old pickup. It's not fancy by any means. It gets me from point A to point B. My current registration fees are already $250 on an almost 20-year vehicle. And we keep adding these fees to these vehicles. I mean, I don't see I guess I don't see the correlation between a $250 license plate fee on such an older vehicle. And we're going to look at as the vehicles get older and newer, then those fees are going to get more and more. And if it's just $5, if we didn't do anything else within the session this current year, and it was just $5 that we're asking everybody to pay for, then maybe I could look at getting on board with a registration fee, although it's still going to be difficult for me to get on board with that. But when we look at all the other legislation that we're looking at passing, you're looking at $5 here, $10 there, another $5 here. Before you know it, we're looking at another $100, $200 out there that we could potentially see with business licensing fees coming out more. And of course, those are always going to get passed back on the consumers. So just to say that it's $5, I don't think that's an accurate description of what we're looking at asking the citizens of our state to look at. We're looking at, $5 here, but what's our our actual driver's license fee is going to be at. Everything's going to go up, and it's always going to go up on the back of the taxpayers. Mr. Chairman, I do genuinely support and appreciate the hard work that you put in on this measure and the amendment, because I think it puts in a lot of, it answers a lot of questions, and it does reduce the physical burden that our taxpayers are going to pay at the registration fee office. But I mean, at a time when we don't have solid numbers on what the system is truly going to cost 2 years down the road. I mean, we went from 2 years ago from 68 million to 80 million. We don't have accurate numbers to even know what the system is going to truly cost us 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I can support the amendment, but on the whole bill overall, I can't support it. So I'm in favor of your amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'll go with Representative Stiver next.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify something. We didn't change the driver's license from 4 to 5 years till 2019. That was House Bill 243. So I just want to get that clarified. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Representative. Representative Brown. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, I think this might be a good situation to just do a little bit of some education. And this is always a topic of discussion, especially with my constituents, about registration fees with vehicles. Personally, I own a newer vehicle and I spend an exorbitant amount of money licensing that vehicle every year. And so I just want to make sure that the members on the committee understand that the majority of, basically almost all of that, is county fee. And those county fees are assessed just like a property tax, and they're divvied out just like a property tax. So just like your house or anything else that you pay a property tax on, those fees are distributed mainly to schools, some roads, but your county takes the majority of the portions of those. You know, as Representative Burt may have said, about 220 of that. I can't remember the exact amount, but I believe all but $35 of that is kept at the county level for everything. We adjusted that back in 2017 by $5, and that was $30, and I believe it's now $35 if I remember correctly. And that's what goes back to the state. So the state, in charge of all the highways and everything along those lines, only receives $35 out of that. The majority of those, you know, that bucket of money that every time you go in and register your vehicle for. So the adjustment of $5 here, $5 there, I certainly respect that. I just want it to be known that the money that we're paying, even though it looks like it's being paid to the state, it's really not. The majority of that is staying in your county and going back to your local schools, your roads, and anything else that you pay for that. If you have a rec mill or anything like that, that's where those fees go in. So the other thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, is at this time I would offer up, just for discussion's sake, and I think it would be an amendment to the amendment, is to keep the $5 fee. And so I'd like to have that discussion. So I'll move that we would strike everything where we remove the $5 to $250 and keep that language at the $5. And I would look for a second after moving.
Seconded by O'Hearn. Okay. Discussion on the amendment to the amendment to revert back and keep the fee change to $5. Representative Obermiller, you had your hand up. Do you want to talk about the amendment to the amendment or just the amendment itself?
Just the amendment itself, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. So I'll take my hand
Please,
down for
please
now.
bear with us then. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you for putting this amendment together. You know, by going back to the $5, I'm against the second amendment, the latest one. And here's why. We still don't have a good fixed cost on what this is going to require from the state of Wyoming to identify the extent of the need to, or you know, the actual execution of getting it fixed. And so I support the notion that we shouldn't nickel dime or appear to be nickel diming the people who register the vehicles in this state. I like the FMR part of it, principally because the trucks are the ones that are doing most of the damage to our roads. I mean, one truck is like 3,000 cars, I think someone told me. So I think that needs to be kept in mind. But I like the way of a sunset. I like the way of a metering of the appropriations available. And this gives time for the people who are involved in this, who know what they're talking about, to get everything pulled together and come up with a plan. We still have the next session coming up. We can adjust this thing up or down as the body feels. So I'm against this amendment and for the chairman's amendment. Thank you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess what I would say at this point is we're looking at $5 one time in a 5-year period. So that's $1 a year. I mean, that's cents pennies, less than a penny that we would be looking at it dealing with on a monthly basis or on a daily basis. So the notion that we are nickel and diming the citizens of the state of Wyoming, to poverty is it's a non sequitur argument to me. But that being said, I think it's also important to understand that the faster we start accumulating money into this account, the more money we will have in this account to pay for this system when the system comes up. And I can assure you and every other member of this committee, as well as the entire public watching this, that price tag is not going to go down. And I would much rather have a large down payment on a system than come back in 5 years after this sunsets and say, we need to have a larger payment towards this because we didn't tax you. We only said $250 over the next, and then we have to have this discussion. Well, we already raised it 2 years ago or 5 years ago. Bite the bullet, do $1 per year adjustment to these license plates and to the registration. $1 per year is not that much to ask. $5 a year is not that much to ask for me, in my opinion. But I would rather have a larger lump sum of money ready to go to pay for this when we do have the final cost and when that RFP comes back and we're all settled, than have to come back and ask for more money yet again. I feel as if we're in a sticky situation that we want to nickel and dime everybody else to pay our bills in the state of Wyoming. And unfortunately, at this point in time, the chickens have come home to roost on this, and we have to pay this bill. And we cannot continue to rely on everybody else to pay our bills for us. So on and for the amendment.
Okay, so I want everyone to be clear on the amendment. The amendment is an amendment to the one I proposed, to the chairman's amendment, but to change the $250 for vehicle registration and the $250 on driver's license fees to $5 each. Okay. So Representative Obermuller, we're on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it's a little overstatement to call it nickel and diming. I think it's pennying and half pennying is what we're talking about here. These amounts are, so ridiculously small when we're trying to, I mean, the big complaint in the state is we don't open it up so people can go to bars and restaurants. To spend $5 on a drink, we're talking about $5 for 5 years. The argument is so absurd. So anyway, in favor of the amendment, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
The amendment to the amendment, Representative, correct? Okay. Any other discussion? Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to make it personal, but I would just like to speak up for the voices of the people, who hold $5 a lot more dear than what we're talking about here. There are people who work for a living and they don't have maybe the things that we have access to. And so, by the way, this fiscal note, the original one, still stands that they don't know how much this is going to cost. So I don't think it makes a lot of rational sense to go here and adjust it, given that we just did it a couple of years ago without knowing for sure how much we're going to be paying for and exactly how. So I think the prudent thing to do is to hold off and go with the chairman's amendment. You can still do more of it if it gets to the floor, if it gets to that point. But I'm against the amendment.
Okay. Representative Obermuller, amendment to the amendment?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Committee?
Question on the amendment.
Question on the amendment being called, and we're voting on the amendment to the amendment. So all in favor, please raise your hand and keep them up for a minute so I can count. Okay. 3, 4. Okay, all opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that amendment to the amendment fails. Okay, any other discussion on the amendment?
Question.
Wait a minute, Representative Obermuller?
Right, just one more point about opposing the amendment, moving it around so that the $5 disappears and it just gets spread out into the mist is just going to create more opposition to it. To Representative Burt's comment about people paying taxes, yes, that's how we pay for things in this state, and we've run this system into the ditch. Nobody, we have to do something about this system. The original bill, we listened to the testimony on that. It was carefully thought out. It was picked as the best way to do it. It has all the estimates determining that the $5 over the period of time that it takes to collect the money. And now we're looking at an amendment that was a back of the envelope calculation with a sunset. We have no idea whether we're going to raise enough money with this or not, with this amendment. And so all these other ideas may be fine, but not with this bill. It was when we first worked it, it was this money can raise this much to pay for the system at this price. We have to do this somehow, and making it look like we can just spread this out so that no taxpayer has to pay any money is just not a true statement. So on against the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go back and kind of, feedback off of Representative Henderson had mentioned with our fiscal note is when we ask of whether or not the current amendment that we're sitting with the $2.50 structure in there will even raise enough money to pay for the system. Again, the big question is we don't even know what the system is going to cost. So we're trying to put a system, we're trying to pay for a system, and we don't even know what the overall cost is. Can we pay for it? Well, we don't know, because the people that have put together the system that we're trying to vote on to try to see if we can even put it into place don't even know what the cost is. So I think when we're trying to get out there and trying to say that we because we just took $2.50 away from increasing to the coffers, that we're no longer not going to be able to pay for this. We don't even know what we're paying for. There's so many numbers out there that have seemed to dramatically increase every other year, every 5 years, whenever the study is done. But again, we're going to come back in how many years are we going to come back and say, well, the 80 million isn't going to be enough. And if we just keep giving out without trying to rein in some of the overspending we're looking at, without trying to protect our citizens and the taxpayers, I would still go back and on the original bill and try to figure out, how much does this even cost? And we don't have that number. So trying to put a dollar amount on how much we need to raise for something we don't even know what we need to raise, I don't. It's something that I'm trying to grasp here at is not even knowing what our end dollar amount, because it's been changed so many times without, I don't think, proper justification. We've heard that if we don't do it now, the system's going to fail, and who knows when. And I'm not a computer programmer, but I did reach out to a couple of those that are, and one actually works for the state. And talking about how fragile this is, and we have to do this now before we can figure out what it's going to cost us. If the system is so fragile, if that cobalt system is so fragile, we have to do it now. I don't think particular casinos in another state would actually be using that same system to maintain their data records on a daily basis. So I don't think I understand if we lose the system, or lose the individuals that know this system, will be so complex that that'll cripple the entire state, in 6 months or a year, whenever it'll fail. Nobody knows when it'll fail. Again, I do appreciate the chairman's work on this amendment. I think it does do good work. It tries to balance out some of the structure. It reduces the cost back on our taxpayers. One question I do have on the registration fees, I'm pretty sure I pay those yearly on my pickup. I understand license, for my driver's license out to 5 years, but we're looking at every year. We're looking at not increase every year, but if we increase this, we're paying that, yearly on my registration vehicle. And again, I can't justify spending any more than $250 on my pickup, much less anybody else that's out there trying to make their ends meet. And we're talking about whether or not we're going to, nickel and dime everybody. That seems to be the catchphrase here now. But what we don't, what we may not be talking about is how many people have been sitting at home for how long. They may not have the extra money. They're trying to figure out how to pay their registration fee or their mortgage or put food on the table. I mean, these are real dollars, whether it's $2.50 or $500. This is real money that people try to figure out how they're going to pay their bills. And to sit there and say, well, it's just an extra $2.50 or an extra $5. Again, it's starting to resonate with the fact that what we look at as our responsibility as legislators isn't the voice of what our constituents are. And I've been receiving emails as we're sitting here talking about, trying not to impose any more financial burden upon the backs of those that haven't been working within our state. So,
Representative Brown, did you have a comment? You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do, and a couple of things here. So first and foremost, I certainly want to make sure that the people watching this and that may watch this in the future understand that I personally work for a living, and any notion to the contrary, that the salary that I pull in from my employer is a substantial amount of money is far from the truth. So I want to make sure that the $5 means to me just as much as it means to anybody. $5 is $5. That's a working's wage, and I understand that completely. What I also understand is the Wyoming Taxpayers Association came out this year with an updated, a fantastic updated comparison of what the average family of four pays in taxes for the services rendered. And I compared that to what the average family of four paid in taxes about 8 years ago and received in services. And what's interesting about it is the amount of taxes has not changed. And it's about $3,600, $3,500 a year is what's paid in taxes. What has changed is the services that are provided for that same amount of money. We have gone from about $38,000 down to $27,000 in services provided. We're not actually saving our taxpayers any money by doing these things. We're just reducing the amount of services that are being provided to the service or to the citizens of this state. And so as we look at this on the amendment that we have before us, I think that what we're doing is a slight of a robbing Peter to pay Paul situation, such as these federal mineral royalties and these diversions. While I like it in one hand, I do have concern that 15 miles could be in my district. That could be an expansion of Highway 30 where we've had fatal accidents in the past couple of years. I personally would rather have those intersections fixed up for that $5 million. I'm not so positive that I am in complete favor of directing money that could be going to the roads, especially along the I-80 corridor, to which everybody on this committee is fully aware of how that highway looks right now. How about the highways throughout the rest of the state? So we're taking money from one section here and we're saying, you guys can't use that money over here. You have to use that to pay for this. Well, I think that's what we pay our executive branch employees to do, and especially the director. He has that authority as it is right now to go ahead and take that money if he needed to. We're now just telling him, you have to do this. And so I'm not positive that I like the strong hand push on this. I do like the sunset. I think having a sunset in there for 5 years is a smart idea. Let's come back and revisit this. What I'm concerned about is we've now cut in half the amount of potential revenue that we're going to be doing. So in another 5 years, this exact same committee is going to have this exact same argument, all over $2.50 maybe a year for license plate fees, and $2.50 for every 5 years for a registration, for your driver's license. I feel like we are really having a hard time standing up and saying we need to figure out how to pay our bills for this state. And right now we're asking for $5 a year plus another $1 a year So $6 a year, most people probably spend more than that on a daily basis for a cup of coffee and a something from the 7-Eleven down the street as they're going to work. We're asking for that on a yearly basis. And we're also going to deny 15 miles of road in somebody's district to not be getting fixed and or repaired or expanded now because we're going to take money from the highway fund for doing this. So, Mr. Chairman, I think we are, I like the usage of and the ingenuity behind this amendment. I think this was kind of a brilliant amendment. I'm not positive I can support it going forward just because I do think that we came to this with a $5 fee increase, and now we have this conglomeration of a bill. And frankly, I think it damages the bill far enough that we won't be able to recover this bill on the floor if it moves forward. So for that reason, I'm probably going to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative McGuire.
Question on the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Question on the amendment having been called. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, all opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, 3. Amendment passes. Committee?
Question on the bill.
Question on the bill being called. Amanda, would you take roll, please?
Representative Baker,
No.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Burt,
No.
Representative Henderson,
No.
Representative McGuire,
Aye.
Representative Obermuller,
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn,
Aye.
Representative Stibar,
No.
Chairman Burkhart.
Aye. Amanda, what is the vote, please?
There are 5 ayes and 4 noes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, committee. Okay, the next bill up for us is, hang on just a second. The size of my desk here is limited, so I can only do one thing at a time, please. Okay, will be the fuel tax bill. Let me get that. Okay, so we have House Bill 26, fuel tax, sponsored by Joint Revenue and Interim Committee. And Amanda, who do we have out there? Is Revenue Chairman Harshman available?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see him in the waiting room.
Okay,
Oh, if anyone in the waiting room can raise their hand to be entered into the webinar, that would be great.
Amanda, I'm more interested in somebody to go over the bill from Revenue, if there is someone from Revenue.
Sounds good, Mr. Chairman.
Amanda, what was that again?
I'm looking right now, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so not seeing anyone. Director Reiner, did you want to present this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to present this bill.
Okay, thank you. Proceed, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Luke Reiner, Director of YDOT. Mr. Chairman, I do have some slides for some background if you're okay with me just quickly
Yes,
presenting.
please share your screen.
Thank you.
If
Melissa,
if you can.
absolutely, Melissa will do that. Miss DeFracis will do that for us. But as we get started, let me tell you, certainly the whole concept of alternate revenue sources and revenue sources for our highway system was one of the topics of discussion during our interim study. And we talked multiple things. Certainly one of them that came out of this through joint revenue was this proposed increase of 9 cents in fuel tax. So the first slide that you'll see as they come up will be one of pictures of your highway system, of our highway system. And I'll draw your attention to the one on the right, which you'll see here as it comes up. and it's labeled a skylight, but what it is, it's a hole in a bridge, and it's on I-80, and it's a problem if you hit it with a motorcycle, and so, but that's happening, and you'll see some other pictures of some degrading asphalt, but the one I want to draw your attention to then, lastly, would be the one on the top left, which is the picture of a rusted bridge over the Snake River.
Director, none of us, I don't think any of us are seeing any of that.
Mr. Chairman, let me see if I could ask Ms. Freud to allow Mr. Fracas to share her screen.
Amanda, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Director Reiner, I don't see that name on my list. There are 3 under Director Luke Reiner. I'm happy to share it for you. I have the PowerPoint.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
And Director, if you just tell Amanda when you need her to go to the next slide, please.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Amanda. So here's the pictures we were talking about. Certainly the skylight or the hole on the right, and I'll just draw your attention to the one on the top left. So we had that's the bridge over the Snake River on Highway 22, directly west of Jackson. And this summer, last summer, we actually had to shut that down for about 3 months. And shutting it down was really described as load rating, because we had to reduce the amount of traffic in terms of weight that could go over that bridge. It was, it's a problem, but the biggest discussion there becomes the economic impact of failing to adequately maintain our critical transportation infrastructure. And what happened with that bridge was, if you needed to ship cattle, now you couldn't fully load your cattle truck. And instead of 8 trucks, it took you 9 or 10. And so if you had to haul gravel from one side to the other, now you had to take a half a load. And so I think the lesson for me as the new YDOT director was that our infrastructure directly supports our economy of the state. And it's just absolutely critical for us to maintain it, besides the pleasure of driving on good roads. So, Mr. Chairman, we could talk more on that, but that's the pictures that really tell 1,000 words. Next slide, please, Amanda. So, Mr. Chairman, here's really the funding history of YDOT, and really going back for about until 1996. And really, what you see is once we hit about 2010, it leveled out in terms of revenue, which is, it is what it is. But what happens as the revenue levels out is that the buying power demonstrated by the declining line to the right, it's just inflation takes over. And our ability to satisfactorily maintain our roads is declining based on inflation. And so that's just the graphic of really the last many years in terms of what's happened with our revenue. If you could go to the next slide, please. It's really another history here in terms of how we've in our state funded roads. And certainly we all this is all have been conscious decisions over the years, and every state has differed a little bit in how they address it. But what I would probably point out in the various colors is the various funding methods that we have used in the state of Wyoming over the years to fund our critical infrastructure. I would point out in 2017, that's really the last year that you see any money from the general fund. And so we've talked about that before in the past, where the decision was made to pull YDOT off of the general fund and really replace most of that income with the increase in vehicle registration. The other thing to point out for those that were around during the days of de-earmarking, so which is really where we sort of set caps on some of the federal mineral royalty monies, You can see what the delta there would have been if that wouldn't have changed. So there's some historical perspective and really some concept of perhaps why we are where we are today in terms of maintaining maintaining our roads. The other thing that I would point out on this slide is that oftentimes you get asked about, hey, could we increase the amount that we get from the federal government in terms of funding for our roads? And what I share, Mr. Chairman, with you and the other members of the commission is that actually, in terms of federal funding, we do very well. And we certainly need to thank Senator Barrasso and his leadership on the EPW committee to ensure that the formula money that we receive from the federal government is what it is. We're what's called a recipient state. We actually receive more money back from the federal government than we put in terms of fuel tax. You know, nationally, most states actually have more state revenue in terms of total revenue than federal in their percentage of allocation and in funding. We're the opposite. We have more federal money than state. And one of the reasons that matters is that we do need to match federal money. So the formula money we match at about 10%. But there's other grants that actually we could get that you have to use more money to match. We have now stopped applying for some of those grants that apply a lot of that require a significant amount of match because we just don't have the state money to do that. So that's really a quick summary on this slide. So if you go to the next slide, and this slide, you know, really gets to the point of, hey, why don't you guys just cut some money, and we'll be able to work our way out of this. And I'll tell you that as the director and as the guy sort of watching what we've got going on here, my opinion is we can't cut ourselves out of this issue, and the reason fundamentally is because we aren't. You know, it's not services we're cutting. It's actually something hard. It's something concrete or something made of asphalt that has to be maintained. That being said, let me just start on the left-hand side and say what we have done as an agency, because I do get asked that a lot. Certainly, we have reduced our staff by about 10% in the last 10 years, and we continue to strictly manage our staff. You're all aware we closed 10 rest areas. We've looked at, hey, how can we minimize, how can we maximize our snow control with spending less, and we've taken those steps. We have delayed capacity improvement jobs, and you probably all saw the list we kicked out last year. That basically said, hey, our focus is going to be on maintaining the assets that we have, and we just aren't going to afford capacity and mobility improvement jobs. Some of them are in your districts, and that's just what we can afford. We have certainly delayed purchasing new vehicles and delayed maintaining our facilities. Eventually, all that catches up to you. But really, the most of WIDOT assets and the expenditures are on our roads. And that's the chart that's off to the right there. And the issue with asphalt and concrete is it looks like it's doing pretty good. And you know, I'm not an engineer, but I have been schooled by engineers here for the last couple of years. And what you see, you know, in that slope that curves down is really an exponential drop off in the quality of roads over time. And so you see that, you know, the asphalt and concrete timelines on the bottom. But the key is to adequately maintain our roads. Really, the best thing to do is to get on them when they're in their good years. About year 7 or year 8, you know, you treat them and that extends their lifetime. But if you don't, they rapidly drop into the fair and then rapidly down into the poor. And it ends up costing us more to replace them than it would to maintain them. And I'm sort of a trend type of guy. And as I watch the trends in percentage of good roads percentage of good roads is going down, and the percentage of fair and poor roads is going up. So those are probably the trends that we would prefer are not in that direction. And then that becomes my concern about saying, hey, listen, I think we as a state need a careful look at what we're doing with our infrastructure and maintain what we have. But that's the talking points, Mr. Chairman, on this slide. If you flip over to the next one, thank you, Amanda. Then when I took this position over here about 2 years ago, the number that I inherited in terms of what's our funding gap to maintain the wideout was about $135 million, and that was a per year funding gap. And I said, well, okay, great. That number hasn't changed for a while. What's the new number? And so we did do a study, and some of you were there when Dye Management presented that information at a Joint Transportation Committee really last the 1st of December, I believe it was. And here's those numbers. You can see what the number is at the bottom. You know, the $354 million. The talking points here is that's whiteout all, and you know, whiteout all is more than roads and bridges. Certainly, it's patrol and motor vehicle services and communications, and you can see what those numbers are. But the ones I really focus on in this discussion, talking about roads today, is the very top number, $103 million, which is preservation of our roads and bridges. So that's trying to stop the bridges like over the Snake River from doing what that one did. And in the interest of time, I'm probably not going to run you through every item on here, but the maintenance, the next line down, about $10 million, that's internal whiteout where we surface and patch. So that's how we maintain the roads. And you can scan down through the traffic and safety and delayed projects. I would point out that we did, you know, it's an all-inclusive, so we did include wildlife crossings in this, which are important to us all. And there's those numbers. And so what I know is our goal should be to make a dent in there and try and slow down the degradation of our roads across the state. Next slide, please. So I think it's one of my responsibilities is to be able to articulate to you and to the public, and certainly to those on my staff, about, hey, listen, what's our priorities? And while we're short money, how will we prioritize how we spend our money? And I just wanted to share that with you because you should be seeing that in the actions we're taking around the state. So certainly came up with a set of guiding principles, and I'll just run you quickly through them. Is above all, our goal is always to take care of our employees, because we all know that they're our most important resource. Now, that doesn't mean we can give them everything they want, but it means that every decision we make, we think about, hey, how do I take care of these men and women who are working so hard and so for us here in the state of Wyoming? But our first guiding principle is certainly that we match the type of money for the project that we have going. And so that has occurred, and we've stopped basically using whiteout money and giving it away to others to make matches. Number two, critical life safety issues. There's very few that are actually critical life safety. Last year, the bridge over the Snake River, we counted as critical life safety. If that thing failed, there's no way around, except for 2 hours into Idaho. And then there's we lost a trucker restaurant, Teton Pass. That was a critical life safety that needed to be fixed. And then we dropped down to number 3, which is preserve whiteout assets. And that's more than asphalt, it's more than concrete. It's our buildings, it's our computer systems, it's our fleet. We've got to make those last as long as we can, and we've certainly taken the steps to do that. But most of that money that we spend, and most of the money that whiteout spends right now, goes into maintaining our asphalt and our concrete in terms of overlays, chip seals, and those types of projects. You can look at 4 and 5, certainly increasing efficiency and effectiveness. 5 talks about trying to minimally impacting the public to the maximum extent that we can when we make cuts. For example, we closed 10 rest areas. Those were all basically closed because of their proximity to convenience stores and another place to take a break. We know people need to take a break. And so you look at, hey, is there some other options besides the public rest area? And then the bottom one there is the mobility and capacity improvement. So, you know, Coffeen South, coming south out of Sheridan, a 5-lane expansion here in Laramie County out by the college, and projects like that. We have just basically said, hey, listen, we don't think we should afford those now. Our money will go to maintaining the system. Next slide, please. Some of you have asked me, and I thought I'd just tell you, we did receive through COVID relief number 2 recently $63 million. Hey, that's a great shot in the arm. It's really nice. It doesn't solve our annual funding shortage, but it does help in the short term. And really, we're working through how to put the majority of that money onto roads as we speak. So I just share that with you. Next slide, please. So as we looked at alternate sources, certainly this is the bill that deals with fuel tax, and the question's got to be, hey, why 9 cents? And really, is when you look at the surrounding states, 9 cents makes us equivalent with Idaho, makes us 1 cent higher than Montana, makes us close to Utah, and so there's the math. Again, this is one of those taxes I don't think that you go back very often.
Director, could you explain the reason why we want to be pretty close to the surrounding states?
Mr. Chairman, really, I think as you look at, there's a couple reasons. One is, as you sort of compare how other states are doing and how they raise their money, there's some concept of, hey, you know, our tax base should be about equal, you know, should be about the same as the other states. The other issue is, and there's others that I expect will talk that are more eloquent in this issue than me. But one of the items that you know as you study this is that the actual price at the pump is market driven and not so much driven by the price of the fuel tax that is paid. And so a 10 cent, or correction, a 9 cent increase in fuel tax does not necessarily equate to a 9 cent increase at the pump. And so it becomes some of that economic discussion that's out there. And I think you'll hear more about that as other people talk. But those would be the 2 reasons, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed, Director.
Thank you. And then as we slip then really to the last slide, the discussion becomes, hey, so 9 cent, what does it do for us, for a state? And lots of discussion in joint revenue over the interim on what the rate should be. And here's really the committee settled on 9 cents. And the thing to remember is that 1 penny of fuel tax, that's 1 penny in gas and 1 penny in diesel, equates to approximately, it's almost $7 million, you know, per year. About 6.7 is really the figure you see on there. And so the 9 cent increase in motor fuel, so that's in both gas and diesel, equates to about $60 million a year.
Representative Baker, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director. I appreciate all the information, and I appreciate the origin of this bill being from the previous legislature. I do have a couple questions in regards to a couple different things. One is the COVID relief funds. The slide, I guess, is a little misleading to me because I guess it leaves the idea that those funds haven't been programmed yet, that they're going to be programmed in the future. I through staff, I sent an email inquiring about those funds, and I received a response that said the Transportation Commission this last Thursday programmed all that money. So I was wondering if you could go ahead and give me some sort of ledger that shows where those monies have been programmed to, so that we have an idea up front. Secondly, I'd like to discuss the fuel tax itself. And in that Transportation Commission meeting, there was some good news brought forward. The good news is that when this bill was drafted, there was a forecast that there would be a deficit at this point of $21 million in the collection of fuel tax. And we haven't seen that. Instead, what we've seen is only a reduction of about 1% of the previous year's cycle. So I guess if you could just comment on that. And then some other things where we've seen some savings, like the snow removal. I guess the snow removal budget is only sitting about 40% of what it was projected to be. So clearly we've seen some projections that have been off, maybe to the point where the origin of this bill, we might have to question that, because if projections were that it would be $21 million in fuel tax collection would be reduced and we would have a deficit, yet we've only seen 1%. I guess to me, this bill is maybe solving a problem that doesn't now exist.
Mr. Chairman?
Director, before you reply, just a reminder to everyone to, we want to stay on the fuel tax bill. We're getting into a lot of background information that I think most of us already have, but we need to really stay on topic if we're going to get these bills done today. So Director, please.
Mr. Chairman, and Representative Baker. So the list of questions in terms of, we certainly can get you a list of where that money's going. In terms of the effect of the amount of fuel tax collected, it is good news that traffic is about back to normal from where we thought it would be. What I would remind us all is of the chart that I showed you of the annual funding gap is a $21 million change helps, but the shortage in funding your roads and the equipment that maintains your roads is by an independent party, $350 million. And the trends that we see have not changed and are getting and won't change unless we put more money to the roads. So the whether it's $10 million or there's changes here or there in this business, I think my recommendation to us all as we watch our roads is that we follow the trends, and the trend is our roads are getting worse and we need to put money to maintain them. Representative Baker, I'm not sure if I got all your questions there.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Representative?
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I do appreciate the total discussion, because the fuel tax, we have to look at this as a holistic picture of your whole budget, which is about $1.5 billion every biennium. Pulling it off the general fund, the $64 million, I guess, is a little concerning to me, because the liaison in the Senate Appropriations Committee wasn't even aware of that money. So us as appropriators, we see this money come and then go before we're ever even made aware of it. So I think it is relevant to the discussion. The last question that I had to do with snow removal and the money that we've saved there so far. In the commission, the Transportation Commission meeting, it was talked about a third quarter adjustment or maybe some carryover. Where else are you seeing those adjustments and possible carryovers, Director? Thank you.
Director?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Baker. So as you look at this, we are saving money on snow removal this year, and that's a good deal. And it's based on the winter that we had. That money is going straight back to roads and straight back to maintaining other assets. So, but it doesn't change. It helps, but it does not change the trend we're on. It's a one-time event, and so we're in the business with the Transportation Commission of always adjusting the revenue with expenditures, because that's our task, is to make sure we match and to make sure we maintain our state infrastructure to the maximum extent that we can, and we do that all the time. with all revenues that come in, and that's the responsibility of that seven member commission.
Okay.
But Mr. Chairman, what I'd like to share with you on this slide is just a reminder to everybody of where the money goes from fuel tax. Certainly state parks gets some off the very top, and that's for the fuel tax that's paid by snowmobiles, motorboats, and off-road vehicles, and you can see what it is. Then the next percentage, and you can see what it is, made up of cities, our municipalities, and then the counties also receive a portion. And so in the end of the 9-cent increase to a fuel tax, the state highway fund would receive about $39 million, approximately, and you can see what everybody else would get. Mr. Chairman, that's a summary of where we're at. Certainly, I can walk you through the bill and then stand for questions, because the bill in itself is very simple.
Okay, Representative Stiver, did you have a question? Did I miss you?
Yeah, but I'll bring it up one-on-one with the director.
Okay, Representative, thank you. Okay, let's go through the bill. Director, why don't you just quickly walk us through the bill? It is pretty straightforward, but just so we know what we're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you turn to the bill, House Bill number 26, really, if you flip over to page 2, line 1, it deletes 24 cents and it inserts 33 cents per gallon, and that was the increase in the gasoline tax. And as you go down to line number 5, you see that there is an increase from 23 cents to 32 cents. And now you're probably saying, hey, why is there a difference between the 24 and the 23 originally, and then now 33 and 32? And the reason for that has to do with the $1, the 1 cent leak in underground storage tank issue that's out there in fuel tax and the allocation of that. But in the end, the total fuel tax is 33 cents. If you flip down to line number 21, that has to do with the allocation and the distribution of fuel that goes to snowmobilers. And it's all relative to the increase of 9 cents. And if you flip over then to page 3, line 18, again, you see the change from $28.75 to $40. And again, that's the calculation of the 9 cent increase. If you flip over to page 4, again, you see this is the allocation to off-road vehicles, and it changes from $18.40 to $25.60. And then on line 21, you again see going from 24 cents to 33 cents, the 9 cent increase. And at the top of page 5, line 2, again, there's the difference in there's the increase from 23 to 32. And then if you go down to line 11 on page 5, again, you see the increase from 24 to 33. And on page 18, correction, on line 18, from 23 to 32. Mr. Chairman, that's all the calculated change in our statutes relative to a respective 9 cent increase in the fuel tax.
Okay. Thank you, Director. Any more questions for the Director? Okay, let's see. Amanda, how many people do we have waiting to speak on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 right now.
Okay, do you have a pecking order of who raised their hand first, second, etc.?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll let them in order.
Okay, thank you. If you go ahead and do that.
Mr. Chairman, they're let in.
Okay, who do we have up first?
Monica was the first person I let in.
Okay,
I see you have individuals who are already in the meeting who also have their hand raised to testify. So they are in order at the top of your screen of
okay,
when they raise their hand.
all right, okay. Thank you very much, Amanda. With that, Ms. Leninger, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Speaking to you from sunny Lander today. My name is Monica Leininger, speaking on behalf of Powder River Basin Resource Council and our members. I certainly didn't expect to go first. I'm sure that there are others much more qualified to speak on this issue. But for those of you who we haven't had the pleasure of meeting in person, our organization's founding members include family farmers and ranchers with historic roots in the Powder River Basin. And today we represent approximately 2,000 people from across the state who seek to sustain Wyoming's quality of life for current and future generations. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak in front of you today. Over deep concern about the state's fiscal status, our members have started becoming increasingly interested in weighing in on concepts to diversify and increase our state's revenue streams. And we stand today in support of House Bill 26. We continue to support taxation that helps to fund the state's core public services and equitably distributes the burden to uphold our state's quality of life. According to a recent study conducted by the Wyoming Center for Business and Economic Analysis at Laramie County Community College, Wyoming's fuel tax is far below the national average and on the lower end regionally. The study says if Wyoming were to reach the median rate of sales and property and fuel taxes as the other 4 states in the study without any sort of additional income tax, it would raise roughly $2.4 billion in the 2023 to 24 biennium. So additionally, fuel taxes bring revenue to our state's coffers immediately without any additional infrastructure or administration of a new tax structure. And we also support the increase in the fuel tax because out of the options presented to maintain funding for our Wyoming Department of Transportation, an increase in the fuel tax is the most equitable and broad-based way of sharing the burden of upkeep on Wyoming roads, taxing both in-state and out-of-state equitably. So thank you so much for your time and important service to our state, and I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Ms. Leninger? Questions? Okay, thank you very much. Amanda, just go ahead in order and let them in.
Mr. Chairman, they are all in.
Okay, well,
Mr. Moline
next.
is next.
Okay. Mr. Moline, welcome back. You're muted.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's hard to teach a redneck technology. Brett Moline with Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Realize I'm probably in the minority on this. I'm standing in opposition to this bill. My members are not convinced that WYDOT has made as many cuts as they can. Have they looked at some different aspects such as contracting out engineering rather than doing it themselves? That's one suggestion. Looking at that 9 cent a gallon increase in fuel, that's going to make us the highest of the surrounding states. And a question on what is that going to do to fuel sales in the state of Wyoming? Will people start buying their fuel out of state? And if it's other than the trucking industry they pay the fuel tax based on where they drive, but are we going to have a net loss in tax revenue? And I also want to point out, you call it a 9 cent a gallon increase. That's a 37% increase over where we're at now. So it's not just 9 cents. It's 37% increase. One of the arguments is probably going to be said is that agriculture doesn't have to pay fuel tax. That's only on things For diesel, it's only what we use off-road. Anything we use on-road, we pay fuel tax on. My members typically keep two different diesel tanks, one for road use and one for off-road use. The penalty for getting caught is not worth the risk of using off-road diesel on the road for my members. One of the things that, should this bill go forward, I would like to see some verbiage in there that this is going to be used for maintenance and construction on roads. I believe that was the last time we increased the fuel tax, that was in there. Right now, I don't see that verbiage at all. It's just an increase to be used how they want. I would like, if the bill goes forward, which I don't support, but if it does, I'd like to see some verbiage that this can only be used on roads, not for additional buildings, not for additional personnel, et cetera. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd sit for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Moline? Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Amanda, whoever was next.
Mr. Chairman, we have Ashley Harpstreet. I
Okay.
would ask if we have quite a few in the room that had their hand raised as an attendee and now as a panelist it's down. If they can raise that so they move to the top of the list, that'd be great.
Okay. Ms. Harpstreet, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Harpstreet, and I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming Taxpayers Association. Thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts today. Wyoming Taxpayers Association is a 501c4 think tank with a 501c3 research arm. Our mission is to advocate for sound tax policy for a healthy Wyoming economy. Positions that we take are based on an analysis of the legislation against the cornerstones of taxation through our policy committee. Their recommendation is then forwarded on to our 21 board of directors for a decision. In the analysis, as I mentioned, we looked at the 4 cornerstones. Is this tax justified? Is the tax equitable among taxpayers? Does the proposal create a stable revenue stream? And finally, is the tax transparent, visible, accountable, and audible? Based off that criteria, Mr. Chairman, WTA supports House Bill 26 fuel tax, as it is sound tax policy for these reasons. It is justified as there is at least $196 million shortfall in the WYDOT surface transportation budget, as indicated by the study from DI Management. It is equitable as the user pays for the miles driven by the fuel utilized. It is stable as any other user fee. It is transparent as the tax is visible, accountable, audible with the current system. In closing, by doing nothing to adequately invest in our transportation system, we are simply passing the expense to build the transportation system to future generations. It is not fiscally sensible to do so and is contrary to the fiscally conservative principles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will stand for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Harpstreet? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Harpstreet. Okay, next.
This is Katie Legursky.
Okay. Ms. Legursky, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Katie Legursky with the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. Fuel taxes in the simplest form are often touted as being one of the most efficient forms of taxation. As a user fee, a fuel tax provides a system of road funding by simply charging road users when they fill up their tanks. Therefore, these same road users benefit from the improvements the user fee generates. The fuel tax provides a revenue source that is predictable, secure, and will not take revenue away from any other public needs. Members of the Associated General Contractors are the ones who build and maintain Wyoming's road, bridges, and highways. We know firsthand how quickly Wyoming's $6 billion transportation system is deteriorating. WYDOT is currently using a pavement preservation method to stretch their limited dollars. But this system is only effective when a road is in good shape so that it can extend the life of that road. Timely maintenance is the key. For every dollar not spent on preventative maintenance today, will require $4 to $8 in the future for a complete reconstruction later. And just to give you an idea on what those costs are for a reconstruction, if you're going to reconstruct a 2-lane road, the cost is $850,000 to $2.5 million per mile. If you're going to reconstruct a 4-lane interstate out of asphalt, that reconstruction cost is $1.5 million to $3.5 million per mile. And for a total reconstruction on an interstate made out of concrete, those costs are $3.5 million to $4.7 million per mile. By basically doing nothing right now to adequately and properly invest in our road, bridges, and highways, we are simply passing the problem down to our children to fund in the future. Therefore, the Contractors Association stand in support of increasing the motor fuel taxes. And with that, I would stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Ms. Legursky? Any questions? Okay. Ms. Legursky, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Jim Willocks next.
Okay. Commissioner Willocks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you would allow, Kelly Little is with me, our Deputy Director, that may be able to add as well. So, Mr. Chairman.
Please admit Kelly. Yeah, there she is.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The County Commissioners Association does stand in support of this bill for a very simple reason. As a commissioner for the last 14 years, I've been in charge of building roads. Now, I haven't been out there in the road grader, but I have definitely been a significant part of county's budgets are roads. And I can tell you and echo what Director Reiner said, this is a systemic problem. This is not something that happened overnight. This is not something that can be cured overnight. The quality of our roads and bridges in Wyoming are in deterioration, and they are in deterioration at an alarming rate. And unless we immediately start taking paths to help correct that, we will affect the economic well-being of our state in such a way that I'm not sure we can recover. The CARES Act funding that we got is nice, it's helpful, but is absolutely irrelevant to this discussion. The snow plowing money that we are saving is great, but I can tell you I've busted my snowplow budget many years in this for the same reason we're saving this year. Those are nice one-time events that help us in the short term, but do not address the concrete and paving and bridge girder issue that this state is facing. I want to paint a picture for you to help you understand why this is so critical. A fellow commissioner of mine lives south of Glen Rock, Wyoming. And when he has to gather up his cattle and sell them to market, this is what happens. He gathers them up, puts them on his corral, loads them onto a semi. He then travels 6 miles of county gravel road, 5 miles of paved county road, 3 miles of state highway, 68 miles of the federal interstate system, 49 miles of a U.S. highway, where he finally goes down several blocks of a city street to deliver those cattle to market. The fuel tax that we're talking about today will help keep that entire system in place and in working order. And I could give you a description of millions of dollars of oil and gas that takes a similar path north of Douglas, or hundreds of or tens of thousands of tourists that take a similar path over county, state, and federal system to enjoy some of our outside natural wonders. Our road system is an economic driver for the state and is critical that we invest in it. Nobody likes paying taxes, and I would say that is one thing that we unanimously all agree on. But this is a fair tax that is charged by the users and is critical to make sure that we maintain the economic well-being of our state, because we must be mobile in order to capitalize on it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if Kelly has anything to add, I'm not sure, but I would stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Willocks. Any questions for Commissioner Willocks? Any questions? Okay. Kelly, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I don't have anything more to add to Commissioner Willocks' testimony. He did a great job of illustrating the point. I would just for informational purposes, let the committee know that counties, the number of miles of county road in Wyoming is just shy of 15,000 miles. Counties maintain more road than YDOT. That is both paved and gravel road. And so this is just very important to not only the state road system, but to the entire road infrastructure system in Wyoming. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Little? Any questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Little.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mrs. Sheila Forsch next.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you,
Ms.
Mr. Chair.
Forsch.
Thank you. Members of the committee, good afternoon. I'm Sheila Furch with the Wyoming Trucking Association. My members have had a long history of supporting increased fuel taxes, and that's not a position they take lightly. Fuel costs and taxes related to fuel is the second highest cost of doing business when you're in the trucking industry. However, we do realize the importance of a highway system. That's where we do our business, and it's important to us that though that highway system is efficient and safe. Almost 70% of Wyoming communities rely completely on the highway system to receive any goods or services that they receive. So the highway system in the state of Wyoming is vital to those small communities. Everyone, whether they use the highways or not, depends on the highway system in the state of Wyoming. So we are supportive of a fuel tax increase at this time. My members are more comfortable with a 6 cent a gallon increase and would prefer to see it phased in. But certainly we are appreciative of the fact of any consideration as far as increasing the fuel tax at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Furch? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheila, just a quick question. You said your members would be more comfortable with the 6 cent, number one, and then a phased in approach. So I guess I would ask two things on this, because there hasn't been a lot of opposition. I haven't heard a lot of pushback on this. I think the majority of people understand the fuel tax issue that we have going on, but why are they willing to look at this, but only at 60% of what we're talking about, number one? And then number two, what type of phase in are your members requesting?
Mr. Chairman. Representative Brown, I don't think my members are necessarily opposed to the 9 cents. When we spoke over the interim, the 6 cent level was what they were comfortable with, and talked at that time at a phase in equal amounts over 3 years. But that's just something we talked about over the interim when we were talking about the actual fuel tax increase.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Furch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Mark Larson next.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Mark Larson with the Wyoming Petroleum Marketers Association and Convenience Store Association. We're the licensed fuel distributors and wholesalers, and also represent the majority of the 345 convenience stores in the state that sell fuel. The WPMA Board of Trustees supports the fuel tax increase, believing that our roads and highways are Wyoming's lifeblood and critical to economic vitality, as you heard the commissioner say earlier. They're also understanding well what Ms. Legursky talked about in the director, on the condition that 34% of our roads are mediocre and poor, and to allow them to further deteriorate would increase costs an additional $4 to $8 if not maintained now. The fuel tax must constitutionally go to the roads and highways, and for that reason, we support the fuel tax. There's no debate among my members and my board as to the need. Mr. Chairman, for the newer members of the committee, I would like to briefly go over a concept former Revenue Committee Chairman Mike Madden referred to many times during fuel tax discussions. Chairman Madden, being an economist, stated that any fuel tax will not fully be passed through to the consumers. He was right. Unfortunately, a June 2020 analysis published by the American Road and Transportation Builders Association in concert with the Transportation Investment Advocacy Center corroborates Chairman Madden's findings. This analysis examined 113 changes in fuel tax rates in 29 states between 2013 and 2018. And yes, Wyoming's fuel tax increase was a part of the analysis. The analysis found that on average, 1/3 of the increase in fuel tax rates is passed on to the customers at the retail price within a few days that the change takes effect, but importantly, with no significant impact after that time. These results confirm previous research that suggests state fuel taxes are just one component of a complex pricing scheme that includes consideration of the fuel tax and oil, or the consideration of the price of crude oil and other state-specific factors. Pricing discussions or decisions by retail gas stations are influenced by the demographics, local competition, and consumer travel patterns. While fuel tax rates vary across states, the extent of the taxes passed into the consumers will depend on how relatively inelastic the demand in that state is. Put simply, and I've been saying this for the 45 years I've been in the business, the street sets the price of fuel and is based on myriad of factors, fuel tax just being one. For most drivers have observed when fueling up their fuel tank, the pump prices can change daily, sometimes several cents. It is not uncommon for gas prices at one station to be different significantly from the competitor across the street. The variability of fuel prices is common, but what most folks may not understand is that the motor fuel tax, while folded into the overall price of the tax at the pump, is not collected by retail sales outlets. Federal and Wyoming fuel taxes are collected at the rack by the refineries and the pipeline terminals. Only in the case of the fuel imports are taxes paid by the distributors. This pass-through rate of gasoline and diesel taxes to retail prices is affected by many things, such as supply elasticity, including the refinery capacity utilization, inventory levels, gasoline content regulations, and the utilization of distillates in the industrial and the agricultural purposes. Finally, the Association of Convenience and Petroleum Retailing found factors that contribute to the retail price variations in different regions. Geographic regions include cost distribution costs, regulatory mandated fuel blend requirements, ethanol, business costs, market conditions, the brand of fuel that you're selling, taxes, and the strategic pricing of each individual outlet. That's huge. Again, fuel pricing is complex and multifaceted. Mr. Chairman, concerns of legislators and citizens that any fuel tax increase, regardless of amount, will be passed immediately onto the consumers is not substantiated by countless studies. Again, the most recent study found that 1/3 of fuel tax increases over a period of 5 years by 29 states and 113 scenarios have actually been passed through the consumers initially and long term. I think that when we look at that scenario, that would mean that you can assuage your fears about whether that 9 cents going straight to the pump. It does not. WPMA supports House Bill 26 and believe that fuel taxes continue to be the most cost-effective, user-based funding mechanism available now and in the future. And one last point, Mr. Chairman, when we were doing the RUC study with YDOT, and I know that bill is not going to be heard this year, but I was asked to do a study about what the impact on fuel taxes are relative to out years of income anticipated by fiscal notes. I was surprised to find that outside of a short glitch in time, that the revenues actually were in all states surrounding Wyoming were eventually met. So with that point, I'm just saying that if we raise the fuel tax increase, we will achieve the fiscal notes that are put in by the LSO. Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Larson? Any questions? Because I know, Mr. Larson, you broke up a couple times. I think I got the information you were sharing. I just want to make sure everybody else got it, and there are no questions on any of that. Okay. No questions for Mr. Larson? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Larson, very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Chris Brown next.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chris Brown, representing the Wyoming Lodging and Restaurant Association, and the Wyoming Travel Industry Coalition. We stand in support of this bill. Safe, maintained, well-maintained roads are a vital, important, critical component to our state's second largest industry, which is hospitality and tourism. Historically, 80 to 85% of visitation to Wyoming has come by automobile travel, whereas 15 to 20% comes to Wyoming in air travel. And as more and more people get vaccinated and feel more comfortable traveling over the next year, continuing to invest in Wyoming's roads will only increase in importance. I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate your consideration today. Again, we stand in support. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Keith Kennedy next.
Okay. Mr. Kennedy, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Keith Kennedy on behalf of Wyoming Crop Improvement Association. And the association reluctantly comes to support this fuel tax increase. And part of the logic behind that was the bill that was previously mentioned that apparently won't be being heard this year on the road use charge. These roads are important both for our inputs and for us to market our products. And we also somewhat question at some point, committee will need to deal with funding by electric and hybrid vehicles, which seems to be one area where it may be falling behind what other energy methods for highway transportation take place. And with that, I'd welcome any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Mr. Kennedy, just so I'm clear, you said reluctantly support. Would you explain that a little bit, please?
As someone said earlier, no one wants to see an increase in taxes, Mr. Chairman, but the members of the Crop Improvement Association see this as a cost, just another cost of business for them that they do have to pay. And if they could pay less and achieve what they needed to, that would be wonderful, but they do see the need. So
okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Kennedy? Okay, thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. David Frazier next.
Mr. Frazier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you hear me just fine?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I appreciate your time on this topic, and I appreciate you entertaining my remarks. I appreciate all that's been said before me. It's an interesting cross-section of organizations who support this, and I think that really highlights the importance of the measure. Obviously, I'm sorry I didn't indicate for the record, David Frazier, Executive Director, Wyoming Association of Municipalities. As Director Reiner indicated in his presentation up front, local governments, including cities and towns, are a beneficiary of this. We use those funds for the local roads. I will point out that we also were part of YDOT's cuts with things like snow removal, which that used to be funded by YDOT, which is now handled by the local municipal governments. And so, we look forward to relief on their budget, as well as any direct benefit that we would receive from this. Having said that, even, in spite of the fact that we're beneficiaries of this, we also support how much the state would benefit and how the counties would benefit. As Commissioner Willix pointed out earlier, we're all part of that network, federal, state, county, and city streets are all part of the network that we all use to get around. I think that this is, and we all know, I think we all know kind of intuitively. I do appreciate Director Reiner pointing out some of the more acute issues that we have in the state. I think we all travel the state quite a bit and kind of intuitively recognize some of the needs that are out there. But again, I do appreciate, we do support this, and we do appreciate the good work that's done by WYDOT and also by our sister governments that are counties as well. So with that, again, thank you for your time, and I would stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Frazier? Anyone? Thank you, Mr. Frazier, very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, next we have Mr. Jim Maganan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association.
Jim, can you turn your camera back on, please?
I tried to, and it tells me that the host has control of it, that I cannot turn it on.
Okay. Amanda, can you fix that real quick?
Mr. Chairman, he should be able to turn on his video.
Now it's on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Jim McGagnon with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. And in our 149-year history, I would feel very comfortable in saying that seldom have you found us on record in favor of a tax increase. We in fact have a general policy that says we do not favor tax increases, and any exception to that requires considerable discussion and debate among our membership. This past December, we had that very discussion on the fuel tax increase, and our members who were participating in our annual convention voted unanimously to support this fuel tax increase of up to 9 cents. And the feeling was that unlike many tax increases, which from our perspective support more government, this is a tax increase that supports a very fundamental infrastructure that's necessary to a lot of Wyoming's economy and lifestyle, and certainly to our industry. We've experienced just in the last year or so an issue or two where our members who have to transport particularly heavy loads of livestock when they're going to market with them were unable to use certain roadways because of bridge weight restrictions that WYDOT was forced to put into place. And that became a serious challenge. And in one case involved quite a long distance of mileage to avoid that because of, again, basically comes back to lack of funding. So because these funds are clearly dedicated primarily to highway construction with a percentage to local governments for public roadways, a lot of which we are dependent on as well, we are very much in support of this legislation and would urge the committee to move forward with it. I did have the opportunity to serve on Director Reiner's road usage charge task force this past year. And while we do believe that that may in fact be the long-term solution to funding our highways in the state and doing it in a way that is more equitable than the fuel tax, it was clear to us at the end of that process that it's premature at this time to move in that direction, and that the fuel tax increase is the appropriate way to move forward. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. McGagnon? Questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McGagnon.
Thank you.
Amanda, anyone else? That looks like it.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe we do have one more, Mr. Tony Gagliardi. I think some have mentioned they don't have the raise hand feature, so he's last of what I see.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And I too am unable to unlock my camera. I'm here representing the National Federation of Independent Business. We have 2,700 members in Wyoming, and it's important for me to share how we take our positions. And we take our positions by member surveys submitted by our membership. We don't have a board of directors that decides the agenda. or a small committee that decides the agenda. Our positions are dictated by our membership. And as such, this year we did a membership ballot on the fuel tax. And again, that came back heavily opposed by 64%. And that is the lowest it's come back in opposition. What members tell me, and I think it's important to note that we are not opposed to an increase in fuel taxes across the board, but we want some accountability with what's going to be done with the funds. We want any increase in dollars to the Department of Transportation to be used exclusively for maintenance and construction. Maintenance and construction, and a list of projects with timelines, costs, and bidding. And I know this gets outside the scope at times, but bidding practices. We want to know that the dollars are being well spent and they're being efficiently spent. So at this time, we do oppose. That's not to say we're not happy to revisit the issue at a later date, provided that we get input from the Department of Transportation on what projects they have in mind and what their timeline and costs are. And with that, I'll answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gagliardi. Any questions for Mr. Gagliardi? Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Amanda, that's everyone?
I believe that is everyone, Mr. Chairman. I don't see anyone else raising their hand in the waiting room.
All right. Committee, before we continue, let's take let's make it about an 8-minute break. I think we've been here for a little over 2 hours now. So let's do that. Amanda, we'll take a 8-minute break, come back at 3:40.
Mr. Chairman, this is Amanda Elliso. Our secretary is having some issues, so she's going to do a quick audio check real quick. Clarissa, we're not hearing any audio from the public meeting room.
Testing, testing the mic.
That works.
So he went to room to far end. Mr.
Sorry about
Chairman.
that. Let's see. We have Representative Baker not here yet that I can see. So we've concluded public testimony. Ah, there he is. And so committee, what is your pleasure?
What is your pleasure?
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Brown. Seconded by Obermuller. Discussion on the bill? Okay. With that then, bill is fairly straightforward.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker had his hand up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Representative Baker?
Mr. Chairman, I would just offer an amendment. I emailed the amendment to everyone, and what it does is it takes all the alternative and the gasoline aspect out of this and leaves the diesel portion in. And so that would be my amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there a second on the amendment? A second on the amendment. Okay, seconded by Representative Stiver. Representative Baker, if you care to just quickly explain your amendment, or have you just done that?
Yeah, I can give another brief explanation, Mr. Chairman. You know, I've done some of my own research on this. I created a poll on social media that got reached 5,400 people. I had 229 people participate in it, and only 16 people supported an increase in the fuel tax. So that's about 7%. I know that we've heard a lot of testimony from industry, about this. And I think that the diesel aspect of this really puts the burden on those who support it, which is the industry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any questions for Representative Baker? Any discussion? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm not, I guess I don't necessarily understand the purpose behind, again, we're back to this. We only want other people to pay our bills. And I feel like I'm not a fan of raising taxes, certainly. But I think raising it just solely on one direct group of people, and mainly this would affect truckers disproportionately compared to everybody else. I don't feel that that's an equitable way to spread this. You know, the usage of these roads. I feel as if you're going to use the roads, you should be paying for it. And frankly, what we're doing right now is we're trying to adjust the increase in fuel mileage or the fuel economy that these vehicles have started seeing. And I think, you know, most of us understand that the fuel economy goes up, the amount of gas that gets pumped at the pump goes down, and thus we see our reduction in revenues. So we still see people driving on the same roads. We still see people's vehicles doing the same damage. We just don't have the same amount of money to keep these roads up that we used to. Instituting this only on truckers seems unfair. If this amendment passes, I won't support the bill. I think it needs to be equitable across the board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think Representative Stiver, you raised your hand. Oh, you're okay? Okay. Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also am against the amendment and against the bill. But if we look at raising just on the diesel cost of on the side of the tax, we're basically cinching who we get to pick and choose who we're going to tax and why. You know, raising it just on the diesel cost to go against the trucking industry. That'll put us roughly, like I said, within the same tax bracket across our neighboring states. So then we have to look at ourselves as how does the trucking industry, and personally speaking, I used to drive over the road trucks, so I used to live this life every day. So if our tax bracket is the same across the board with our neighboring states, give or take a few cents, then basically what truckers are going to end up doing are looking for the cheapest fuel price. And basically where I'm at is we have a lot more of the higher fuel diesel tax or diesel cost per gallon. So we're going to start seeing our trucking companies buy our fuel outside of the state, travel through the state, and then try to offset their tax cost. And this is going to be back on the backs of everyday Wyoming residents that I own a diesel pickup. So, I mean, this is going to tax me just driving back and forth to work every day, much like anybody else or ranchers and anybody else that owns a pickup to go out and enjoy the lifestyle of Wyoming. So I'm against the amendment and the bill. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Question on the amendment.
Representative Brown?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Baker.
Yeah, I want to respond to a couple of things there if I can. I just want to try to improve bills, Mr. Chairman. I can't support this bill the way it is with putting the burden on industry and on the diesel vehicles. There's no doubt, Mr. Chairman, that the trucks and the diesels and the industry does the damage to the roads. It's not the cars, it's not the passenger vehicles. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll accept my fate with this one, withdraw it here and try again on the floor, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Baker. Okay. Anyone else?
Question.
One moment, Representative Brown. Okay. I will propose an amendment based on what we've heard to phase in the 9 cents at 3 cents a year over 3 years. Okay, seconded by Henderson for discussion. Any discussion on that concept? A phased in approach.
Question.
Okay, question being called. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, amendment is adopted. Now I have that amendment drafted, so LSO already has it. But that's what it does. It's a lot of words, but it phases it in over 3 cents a year over 3 years. Okay. I also have another one based on some of the testimony, which would in effect, and it's a long amendment due to the fact that it has to be written in light of the previous one that the committee passed, that allows the use of that 9 cents additional for road construction, maintenance, and repair only, nothing for administration or operating expenses. And that's it in a nutshell.
Second.
Seconded by Henderson. Okay. Any discussion on that amendment? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In essence, I agree with the sentiment of it, and I'll probably vote for it. My concern is this bill and hamstringing this really just allows them to cost shift elsewhere with their budget. So while it's an admirable notion that we would be doing this, we have a strict constitutional authority anytime we raise a fuel tax to go to road usage and maintenance. Now, granted, that could be a position that goes out and does let's say soil sampling or something along those lines. It could be for that because that directly correlates to that. And frankly, I personally don't have a problem with that because they're doing the road work that we're paying that for. So I don't really have a problem with it, but I do think that it just allows for a cost shift with some of their other fuel taxes that we wouldn't be able to tell this. So I guess maybe as the ex appropriator, and you might be able to inform me if that's the case or if I'm wrong there.
Okay. Representative Brown, when we last raised the fuel tax in 2013, we put the same control in place on it. And that was a 10-cent increase. And yes, from the reports from the department at that time, that fuel tax money, that increase did go to specifically roads. So that was where I got it. We're just kind of repeating what we did 8 years ago. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification, sir. Does that also include the bridges in that? Are they restricted?
Representative, it would include the bridges. They're part of the roads and they have to be maintained. Yes, we've never called those out specifically because they're just an integral part of the road. Okay. Representative Obermuller, did you have a comment?
No, sir.
And I apologize if I look like I'm moving around. As all of us see, our screens readjust periodically and your position on the screen changes. So any other comments on the proposed amendment?
As long as the drafts don't move, I'm okay.
Representative Stiver, what was that again, please?
As long as the drafts behind you don't move, I'm okay.
Okay. Committee?
Question?
Question having been called. All in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 6. All opposed? 2. Amendment is adopted. Any other amendments on the bill? Okay, committee? Question having been called. Amanda, would you take roll, please?
Representative Baker,
No.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Burt,
No.
Representative Henderson,
Aye.
Representative McGuire,
Aye.
Representative Obermuller,
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn,
Aye.
Representative Stiver,
No.
Chairman Burkhart.
Aye. Amanda, I have 6 ayes, 3 noes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, thank you, committee, on that one. By the way, the reason I ask Amanda for the count is that, so my count and hers are the same. There have been some problems with some of the Zoom meetings on making sure that the votes are properly recorded. It's just the nature of the problems we face in this venue. So with that, the next bill is military code revisions. And again, I have to find my copy. And before I forget, do I have a volunteer for House Bill 24? There is. Okay, Representative Henderson. And someone for House Bill 26.
I was what? Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, yes.
I want to do 26. Thank you.
Want to do 26? Okay. Okay, anybody for House Bill 24? Representative McGuire. With that, Amanda, we will move to House Bill 22, Military Code. And who do we have in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Greg Porter entering the webinar.
Okay.
Hey, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee.
Good afternoon, General. Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Would you walk us through the military code revision bill, please?
Yes, sir. Hey, for the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter, and I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. The bill you have before you is House Bill 22, the military code. For those of you that will remember, this was an interim topic that we studied this last interim. And the basis for this was really that our military code has not been updated since 1998. So it's been about 22 years since the military code in Wyoming had been updated. And what this bill seeks to do is to correct some of the issues that prevent us from utilizing our military code in its current form. We did take quite a bit of work from the Attorney General's office, Chris Smith and our team here, to format the bill and to bring this out. The bulk of the changes are really administrative changes, changing courts martial from plural to singular, changing some ands and ors, which is why it's so long. But the basis of it is really to allow us to use and function as a Wyoming Military Department with the Uniform Code. Sir, that's really the bottom line thumbnail that I have for the bill. If we'd like, I could certainly, the team and I can answer any questions, or sir, I leave it to your pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. General, as I've read through the bills, you're right, most of the changes are administrative and wording changes and that. Why don't you take us through the more substantive changes? That there are a couple of additional paragraphs in here, and that's some of the changes, pretty much in my copy, all the red paragraphs. If you would just take us through the major portions of those, so that the committee has an understanding of those changes, because those are the more substantive changes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the committee, I'd like to turn it over to Chris Smith to actually walk through those changes.
General, that's fine. So, okay, I think you're just going to change seats. All right.
Yes, sir. Musical chairs.
Mr. Smith, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Chris Smith, the Senior Counsel for the Wyoming Military Department. As General Porter mentioned, it's a fairly substantial bill, 19 pages, but fully over half of it is really not substantive changes. It's really, once we opened up the code to make the changes I'll go through and describe for you, we decide to fix the parts that are just wrong. So with that, the first substantive change I'd like to bring to the committee's attention is on page 2. This is at the very bottom, beginning on line 23, where we talk about rulemaking onto the top of page 3. I've had a couple of people ask questions about this because it currently says the governor upon the advice of the adjutant general, and the change we're trying to make is the adjutant general shall promulgate or publish rules. This was a change recommended by both LSO and the Attorney General's office, because in the executive branch, the governor does not promulgate rules, the agency directors do, and the governor approves them. And I just wanted to highlight that because I have had several questions about it. In fact, if you look at Title 19 as a whole, and I'll reference really quickly just a couple of things, like the Military Assistance Trust Fund, which is 19.7.402, and subpart C says the adjutant general shall promulgate rules and regulations. The First Responder Fund in 1911.115 says the adjutant general shall promulgate rules and regulations. So essentially, this change on the bottom of page 2 onto page 3 is really just bringing it in line with what we do in the statutes to talk about how we do rules. And sir, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to stop as I go through each section and answer any questions the committee may have before moving on.
Sorry about that, Mr. Smith. I know that's fine, and the committee will probably interrupt you whenever they feel they need to.
Sounds good, Mr. Chairman. Well, then moving on, continue on to page 3. You can see beginning on line 5 in subparagraph B, we basically, the way the code is currently written, it adopts the entirety of the federal manuals for court martial. And, you know, I've talked to some of the members of the committee about that. And this is the manual for court martial. This is an older version. Representative Stiver has a newer version. And basically, it has to do with how the Title 10 active duty forces do court martials. This isn't what we do. And one of the problems in our code is it adopts all of it when really all we want to adopt is what we call the punitive articles. That is the crimes, right? So within that big book I showed you, the punitive articles are essentially this section. So it's just a very small part of it. And it just keeps us from having to list all the crimes out in our statute that can change from time to time. And so it's just by reference, and that's what this section does. Then further on page 3, you get subsection C, and it basically, the state military code allows us to do what we call courts martial, which are criminal trials. And it is a state action. We are under the authority of the governor. We're within the state of Wyoming. Therefore, we wanted to specify in subparagraph C and make the changes in subparagraph B on page 3 to say we're going to follow our state criminal code rather than the federal rules that really shouldn't be applying. So that's what on page 3, that's the first major substantive change in the code. Moving on to page 4.
Representative Stiver?
Yes, through the chairman, Colonel Smith. When was the last court martial done in Wyoming?
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, as we discussed, it was done in the 60s. And the problem we've had a couple of opportunities in the last couple of years where we would have liked to have done a form of court martial, but because our code is so woefully out of date, as I'll kind of highlight here as we go, it's unusable. We simply can't use it. So we have what essentially is pages and pages of Wyoming statute that are so out of date, it's of no use to anyone. So what we're trying to do here is fix it so that it can be used as a disciplinary tool for our military, and make what every state has a military code for their guard, including ours, but we just need to fix ours so we can actually use it.
Okay, continue.
Thank you, sir. So down at the bottom of page 4, beginning on line 17, you'll see a new paragraph sub F. And this is really what's missing from the current code is who defends our members who are accused of a crime in a court martial. So this section says one will be appointed at no charge for them. It'll be a judge advocate, somebody who's trained in military law. And that's what basically this does. Again, it's something that's missing from our current code that we needed to put in there. And it's the way we want to do business. Now, a member can go hire a civilian defense counsel also, but they don't have to. And if they hire one, it's at their expense. And that's really the federal model. We've adopted it here for our state process. And then moving on to page 5 at the very top, a new subparagraph G. Again, this is a clarification in our current code. Criminal trials in the state of Wyoming, generally speaking, are two-part. One, you have the findings of fact. Did a crime occur? If the jury, in the case that a jury is present, because you often have a judge alone trial, once the jury has determined that the person is guilty, usually anyway, it's the judge who decides what the sentence is, because they're familiar with similar cases. They can consider all the nuances of the case that they just sat through. So again, this subparagraph G clarifies that you don't have the jury decide the punishment, you have the presiding officer, the judge, do it. Again, trying to make it like our state court system. Moving on pages 6 and 7, we get to 1912-104. And this is talking about the 3 levels of court martial. And this is the same as on active duty. And it is comparable to what happens in civilian courts. So we call a general court martial, which is the most serious offenses. It's like a felony court. It's like going to district court facing a felony. Then we have down at the middle part of page 6, a special court martial, and that's like the misdemeanor court. That is one that's really dealing with up to a year in jail. You can get kicked out of the military, just like a circuit court trial, criminal trial in the current Wyoming system. And then finally, you have the third kind, which is a summary court, which is actually administrative. So they can't kick you out, they can't send you to jail, but they can do things like fines, extra duties, reduce you in rank. It's all those kind of things, but it's considered administrative. So in some ways, it's kind of more like a municipal court, to use the civilian analogy. And then on page 7, we added a section in subparagraph D beginning on line 12 to talk about summary courts, to clarify it's administrative, not judicial, and it's run by a summary court officer, not a judge. And it's really a simplified process. And again, this is analogous to both what they do on active duty and what is done in the simple court system in some of our bigger counties. We can't hear you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
You're muted, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize. Representative Stiver.
Through the chairman, Mr. Smith. Now, with these court martials, because I know if you're court martial on active duty, you're considered a felon, convicted felon. Is that going to be the same?
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, it's a felony depending on what the maximum punishment for that crime is. If it's a year or less confinement as the maximum possible punishment, it's considered a misdemeanor. So most of the court martials on active duty are considered felony trials because usually you often won't go to court unless it's going to be more than a year in jail. So under Wyoming criminal law, if it's over a year potential confinement, it's a felony. If it's under a year, it's a misdemeanor. And we've kind of adopted that here for our purposes. On active duty, any conviction by a court martial, either general or special, is considered a felony for reporting purposes, but that's federal law. We're trying to make ours akin to what we do in the state of Wyoming. And that is, if it's a special court martial, it's like a misdemeanor court. So it's not considered a felony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, sir. Moving on, we get to page 8, subparagraph C on line 9. And here we talk about, we just wanted to clarify who the judge can be, and we wanted to make it a qualified judge. The current code requires it to be a military judge. A military judge, by definition in the Manual for Court Martial, the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, is someone who is an active duty judge who's been through an active duty court class and has been certified by the 3-star head of each service legal department to be a judge. Again, we want this to be a state court process. We want it to be a qualified judge as determined under the rules. I actually talked to some of our local judges and also the Wyoming Supreme Court, and we'll work with them to do the rules about who can be a judge, but we don't want it to be an active duty military judge as the current code says, because there's really no mechanism for an active duty judge to come into the state and conduct a state court. We also didn't want to say it has to be a sitting Wyoming state judge, because as most of the members are probably well aware, their docket is huge, and in most counties they are struggling to perform their duties already, and we didn't want to add a court martial to them. So we set a qualified judge to be determined by the rules, and we will work with to determine what those rules are. Usually it means we can get somebody training to be a military judge, but they won't be a Title X military judge. So we will have some assurance that they'll be able to comply and conduct a trial fairly for the accused. All right, turning over to page 9. I wanted to highlight a couple of things here. Well, first of all, on line 1, we added a subparagraph E. Pretrial hearings are required for felony courts like general court martials. The current code doesn't say who does that. So what the active duty does, because judges are only assigned for the actual trials, we specify that pretrial hearings will have the adjutant general appoint a qualified judge advocate, and an attorney to run the pretrial hearing. This is a little bit like appointing a master or special counsel that is done in some state courts. So again, it's just clarifying something that was missing from our code that meant we didn't know how to operate. Moving down to line 9, I wanted to highlight for the committee that here, beginning on line 9, I just wanted to clarify, some have asked us about what the role of the governor is in these court martials. And unlike the civilian criminal court system, our commander-in-chief, our governor, actually has a role in court martials. When the court martial is completed, as says down here in 9, and this is the existing statute, it says the governor may suspend or set aside all or part of any sentence as the governor deems appropriate. So essentially, once it goes to the court and we have a conviction as well as a sentence by the court martial, it will then be reviewed by the governor, who can do something better, essentially. They can't make it worse, but they can set it aside. They can change any part of the sentence. That is analogous to what is done on active duty, where the general officer convening the court reviews what happened and can't do worse for the member who faced the court martial, but can always do better. So unlike the civilian criminal practice, the governor is interposed here as our commander-in-chief, because that's how the military runs. So, and again, down on line 13 through 18 on page 9, after the final judgment, it again clarifies sentencing and approval by the governor. At that point, the defendant would still have the right to appeal the case, either to the Supreme Court if it's a felony court, just like a state district court, or to the district court if it's a misdemeanor court, like the circuit court does. So we have multiple levels of appeal for our members in the existing statute with our small tweaks to make it work better. So moving on to page 10, we specify beginning on line 10 that an accused, somebody who's facing a court martial, can ask for a jury if a jury is allowed for that type of court. Summary courts are administrative, like we talked about, so there are no juries. Special courts and general courts, you can ask for a jury. So this again just clarifies that we can have a jury. We also specified who can be on that jury, which is generally National Guard members who are their peers, because we are talking about a military court martial with military offenses. So turning on to page 11 through 13, this regards 1912-106, which essentially talks about subpoenaing people to appear at a court martial. And this required some substantial changes because some of the terminology used is just not workable. For example, on page 11, beginning on line 6, it talks about the commander-in-chief, who is the governor, the adjutant general, our 2-star Major General Porter, or the president of the courts martial, which is basically the jury foreman, can subpoena people. And that's just not the way it works. So we turned it into the convening authority, who's the person who wants to have the court martial, or the appointed judge, or the summary court officer. So that is analogous to what happens. The district or county prosecuting attorneys are the ones who subpoena people, or they have the judge do it when there's a sitting judge. So we, again, tried to change this whole section to make it more analogous to what happens in state criminal courts. I believe there was a question.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel, very good overview. Thank you. On the bottom of page 11, and I'm sure this is some of the legalese and the update, but lines 19 to 22 there, you're only going to have one person served, right? Or could it be a group of people? So I think this is referring to an individual. And so looking at the context there where it says line 21, subpoenas, subpoenas ducis tecum, are we talking about one or more of that, whatever the heck subpoenas ducis tecum is?
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Henderson. Unfortunately, I have had a lot of experience in the criminal court system representing clients, let me clarify. And essentially, you subpoena people who aren't willing to show up. They can be witnesses, they can be experts, they can be arresting officers who are basically witnesses. Subpoenas ducis tecum, I'm even going to stumble over the words, is essentially a subpoena for a thing. So if there's a record you want, like the blood alcohol record in a DUI, you would issue a subpoena ducis tecum to the agency that holds that DUI result, and they would give you the paperwork, the report, and that's what a subpoena ducis tecum is. So you wouldn't subpoena just the accused, because generally we order them to show up. It would be, let's say there's a big fight at a bar downtown involving a military member, and for whatever reason they're in a court martial. We would want to be able to subpoena all the people who were involved who saw what happened. We might want to subpoena the records of the bar in terms of what they served the accused to figure out how inebriated in public he was. And so that's the kind of subpoenas we're talking about down here at the bottom of page 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Smith, proceed.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to page 13. On page 13, beginning on line 5, we basically, well, down on line 13 sub E, we're just clarifying if you disobey a subpoena, the sheriff can basically arrest you. And this is, again, exactly what happens in a state criminal court. If you ignore the order to appear, then you're subject to being arrested. And in subparagraph D up on line 5, as well as line 13 on page 13, we talk about you have a problem. And again, a very minor change from what the existing code already says. Moving on to the bottom of page 13, really on to page 14. In a court martial on active duty, we don't have jurors, we have members. So we have attempted here, and actually we have attempted to, because we want this to be like a state court, we've adopted jurors instead of members. So that's one of the changes you see on page 14. So it's not a change in how we do it, it's just a change in nomenclature, because when you tell somebody we have a juror, if you tell them they're a member of a court martial, nobody knows what that means. So going down to page 15, onto page 16, I really wanted to highlight this change because it shows how out of date in poor the current statute is. Beginning on line 19, subparagraph 3, we talk about if someone is adjudged a fine and they fail to pay it, the current code is frankly ridiculous. So down there at the very bottom of page 15 on page 16, it basically says what the part that we're deleting. Until the fine is paid, they serve one day in jail for each dollar. So think about this for a minute. So if they're adjudged a $500 fine and they don't pay it, they have 500 days in jail. That's clearly an absurd result. So onto the top of page 16, we basically said if you fail to pay your fine, you can go to jail for up to 5 days. If you continue to fail to pay it after 60 days, you have an additional 5 days. It's again, just clarifying something in the code that was totally unworkable. We're not sending anybody to jail for 1.5 years for failing to pay a $500 fine. Moving on to page 16 in section 1912-109. Again, these are small changes here. We added, instead of just talking about felonies against the laws of Wyoming, we really want a crime. And we added in any political subdivision on the recommendation of the Attorney General, because there are some municipal codes in various of our municipalities that are not part of the laws of Wyoming, but they're part of that political subdivision. I don't know what that would, disturbing the peace is one that is often in a municipal ordinance, trash laws, not taking care of abandoned vehicles on public streets. It's that kind of thing. I can't really think of a time we would want to court-martial somebody for like that, but on the recommendation, we put it in there. The second thing I wanted to highlight on line 13 is it talks about arresting, and in the military, we apprehend people. Just again, a nomenclature thing. So moving on to page 17, we're getting there. On page 17, the change I wanted to highlight here is down on line 8, part of subparagraph E, and we're talking about the decision on whether or not how you go to court. And the current code says the district attorney for the county. Well, as the members are no doubt well aware, there's only 2 counties, only the Casper and Cheyenne have district attorneys. The rest are prosecuting attorneys or county attorneys. So that's the only reason that change is done. It's a prosecuting attorney. Moving down to the bottom of 17 on to 18, we talk about, this is 1912-110. In the current code, you will see a couple of pages of what the crimes are under the military code. What we've done here is adopt the punitive articles under the existing UCMJ, so we don't have to delineate every single crime as the current code does. There were 2 provisions that were part of the current code that are not in the punitive articles of the UCMJ, and that's where we go on page 17, being on line 22 onto page 18, where we kept those in and just added what the maximum punishment that was elsewhere in our current code to those 2 provisions. And you can read those 2 provisions. The second one on line 18 is one that we've had a few questions about. And again, this is part of the current code. And it talks about a member of the National Guard who resists or aids in resisting the execution of process, threatened insurrection, aids or attempts to rescue or escape of another from custody or confinement. Some members have asked about this threatened insurrection, and all I can say is it's in the current code. It would require an action by the governor to decide, or the adjutant general to decide to enforce this law. And so we're in the military, as I always like to remind my members, as a former military member, we all raised our right hand and we swore we would uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Wyoming and follow the lawful orders of those above us, including on the federal side and the governor, who's our commander in chief. So these two provisions are just talking about that. And they were added in by this body over 20 something years ago, and they exist in the current statute. We're just moving them to clarify these are two extra Wyoming specific crimes that are on our books. So with that, sir, I'm ready to talk about section 2, but I'll wait in case there are any questions.
Any questions? Oh, Representative Stiver.
Code, where it says they can be court-martialed for speaking words against the president, vice president, any member of Congress, the secretary of defense, secretary of the department, or the governor, remember the legislature. I'd like that a little more drawn out. I mean, I remember back when I was on active duty, when a certain president took office, we were cracking jokes quite often. And we had a formation and they said you had to back off on some of the stuff. Can you explain that just a little bit more, what that means?
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Stiver. A couple of things come to mind. So it's specific to contemptuous words. That definition is in case law, and I don't have it right in front of me, but it's more than just joking around. It would require you to essentially to use the word my grandmother used the word, casting aspersions upon somebody. It's more than just the normal kind of byplay that goes on within the ranks. And the other thing I want to point out is the maximum punishment for this, it's a misdemeanor. So it's a fine, up to 6 months in jail, or both. That's all it is. So that's considered squarely a misdemeanor. So it's not a very serious offense. In fact, it doesn't allow you to be kicked out of the military for it. So that's about all I can say. We've never used it, but it's on the books. It was passed by the legislature well before 1998. My understanding is it's been on the books for decades.
Okay. Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Earl, sometimes it's listed or shown as Wyoming National Guard, and others it's just National Guard. Is that just a technical oversight, or? And then related to that, if you would, sir, is someplace it puts his, and I know it's understood to mean, whatever gender, but would this be an opportunity to fix those technical things?
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, National Guard, it's meant to be the Wyoming National Guard. This code only applies to members of the Wyoming National Guard by definition. So it's only folks that belong to our guard. So in some places in the statute, if it said National Guard, we left it alone because we could have added in Wyoming, but we didn't. The second thing about the he or she, the personal pronouns, and certainly I'll defer to LSO on this, but my understanding is for many years now, LSO's position under the direction of the legislature is we don't change personal pronouns. If we say he, I think there's actually been a bill that's passed many years ago, it means he or she. So we don't change that in the statutes. So we don't go through our entire multi-volume statutes trying to change it. Now, certainly if the members of this committee wanted to try to do something in that regard by an amendment to this bill, far be it from me to say you can't do it. But my understanding from LSO's attorneys in past bills has been we use the male pronoun because there's another either policy or statute, I apologize, I don't know which it is, that says the male means the female as well.
Right. Representative Stiver, please. Sorry if I missed you the last time.
No, Chairman. Through the chairman to Colonel Smith. On that, it's only when they are on duty, correct? To be charged with that.
Mr. Smith?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, in almost every case, so that's the lawyer answer, it depends, right? So what we have said is military members are essentially members of the military 24/7. The bulk of our force are the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. If they are given a direction, and I'll give you an example in a moment, even when they're not in a duty status, if they disobey that order and it has an impact on the good order and discipline of the unit, then it is actionable under our military code. The example is, for example, if two people are in the Wyoming National Guard and they're both members and they're both married to other people, and they're part-timers, they're what we call drill status or M-Day guardsmen. If within the unit there becomes a lot of controversy because they're dating each other even though they're still married to other people, that becomes a morale issue within that unit, even though if they're open and notorious in this dating relationship in some of our small towns, and it's having an impact on drill weekend, people are picking sides, want to fight over it kind of thing. We say you can be given an order to stay away from each other, even though you're not 24/7, 365 in a military status. And that order would be enforceable. To be a lawful order, it has to come from an appropriate commander, an appropriate superior. It has to be clear, concise, and communicated to the member. And there has to be what we lawyers call a nexus to military duty. So unless it's impacting good order and discipline within the military, we don't care what people do when they're not on duty. If it has an impact on the unit, we do care, because we're in the business of representing this country, going to war, responding to state emergencies, and we can't have people fighting over who's sleeping with who and who's the wronged individual. It just can't be done. So that is the it depends part of my answer to the question. It would be very, very rare that we would take anybody to a court martial if it didn't happen in a duty status on order somehow, because that's when the more serious offenses would occur. But I can't tell you it would never happen.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Smith?
Sir, moving on to page 19, you'll see section 2, and I want to take a minute. This is basically where we repeal a lot of the language that has been replaced or is no longer needed because of the changes in the bill. So the first statutory section is 1912-104B3, and that had to do who could start a court martial. The current code allows a commander to do that, to take somebody to a special court, a misdemeanor court. We believe that's too low. We would prefer a general officer to do that. And so this section, this B3, was the commander, and we just took it out. We don't do court martials that much. We don't expect them to do them that often. And it was just too low an officer to court martial somebody, to go through all the time, expense, and potentially put somebody in jail for a period of time without it being a more senior officer. So that's all that section does. The second one removes both subparagraphs A and C from 1912-109. And this talks about immunities and subpoenas again. And because we rewrote it, it A and C aren't important anymore. We added them all into B. That's just the way LSO wrote the draft bill. So they're just not necessary anymore because they're covered. Finally, the bigger repeal is to 1912-110A. And these, again, are the various listed crimes. If you go to the current statute, you'll see just a whole bunch of listed crimes that we've avoided having to deal with because we've adopted the punitive articles. And that does really two things. One is it gives us all the elements for those crimes without specifically putting them in statute. Our current code just says, for example, any person who violates or fails to obey a lawful order. There's no definitions, there's no maximum punishment. So by referencing the punitive articles that has all of that in it, we can get rid of all these statutory sections without having to specifically list off all those crimes. The second thing that does for us is as the crimes change, and I'll give you a specific example, because of cases that have been heard in the appellate court system, we don't have to change the statute because we reference the punitive articles, which change every 2 to 5 years or so. An example of that is we used to have under Article 120, that's a reference to the punitive articles, it was rape, right? What we all know as rape. Well, because of some case law, it became sexual assault, and the levels of sexual assault changed by federal law and really state law. And so our code, by referencing the punitive articles, would automatically adopt those changes with not having to go back to the legislature when there's been a law change under the federal criminal court system, and it just by reference. Finally, the other problem we have with our current code is it doesn't tell us what version of the crimes to use. The manuals for court martial, the Uniform Code of Military Justice changes periodically. In my 28 years of military duty, it's probably substantively changed about a dozen times. And so the problem we have, if you commit a crime today under our current code, it doesn't tell us what version of the code are we supposed to use. So what the bill does is says it's the version in effect at the time of the crime, which essentially is what federal and state of Wyoming laws say. If the crime changes down the road before you go to trial, it doesn't matter. It's a crime at the time the incident occurred. And we just clarified that here. And so that's really what that Section 2 repeals are. It will actually make the statute shorter if this bill is passed, and it will make it more streamlined. And our hope is, our goal in starting this whole process in the interim, in working with the Attorney General's office and LSO, was to make something that was proof as much as possible against future changes. So we wouldn't have to keep coming back to the legislature, which we apparently don't do very well since we haven't changed the bill in 22 years. With that, sir, I'll stand for your questions. That's the bill.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Smith? Any more questions? Okay. Amanda, do we have anybody wishing to speak on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone in the waiting room with their hand raised.
Okay. So anyone, I'll just make the announcement, anyone for public comment? Any public comment? Amanda, did anyone raise their hand?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With that, I'll close public comment. Committee?
Move the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Representative Brown, seconded by Representative O'Hearn. Okay, discussion on the bill. I think we've already been through it. Okay, the amendments. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I guess.
Representative, go ahead.
There was some discussion about the intention of National Guard versus Wyoming National Guard, and that this is only applicable to the Wyoming National Guard, of course. I'm wondering if we should have a technical amendment and have LSO draft the technical amendment or not to correct that language or not. I don't know if it's worth really bringing forward or not, but maybe, you know, if your retired colonel has any thoughts on that and whether or not we want to do that, or if we should just leave it be and just go for it.
Representative Brown, so what you're saying is anywhere it only says National Guard, we add in Wyoming. So it reads Wyoming National Guard. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's just for consistency, really.
Representative Stiver?
I'll second his Representative Brown's motion to do
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Representative Henderson, we have an proposed amendment.
Question on the amendment.
Well, one moment, please. Mr. Smith, would you care to comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Our quick review of the bill, it's honestly something we didn't really consider. We think there's about 6 changes throughout the 19 pages where it says National Guard without Wyoming. Certainly, it is the intent. It's the operation of law in a Wyoming statute, only applies to Wyoming National Guard members. But I will certainly we would have no argument against that amendment for clarity purposes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I think question was called. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? Okay, amendment passes. Okay, Amanda, did you get that?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Clarissa, sorry. Thank you. Okay. Anything else on the bill?
Question.
Question having been called. Amanda, please take the roll.
Representative Baker,
Aye.
Representative Brown,
Aye.
Representative Burt.
Aye.
Please repeat, Representative Burt.
Aye.
Thank you. Representative Henderson,
Aye.
Representative McGuire,
Aye.
Representative Obermuller,
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn,
Aye.
Representative Stivar,
Aye.
Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
Chairman, there are 9 ayes.
Thank you, Amanda. So who will floor manage this one?
Do that.
Well, I thought Representative Stiver wanted to previously. Okay, so Representative Stiver, it's all yours. And we'll help you. Trust us.
I'm gonna need help.
Okay, so with that, the final bill today is House Bill 71, Mountain Standard Time. And we have Representative Bear with us.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, he's admitted into the room.
Okay, thank you. Representative Bear? There you are.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
Representative Bear, please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members. I appreciate this time, and I will be brief as you've done in some good work this afternoon, and I want to get you through this. We'll try to make this a quick one so you can get into the debate of it. And I know that this issue has been debated at great length over the last several years in the House and the Senate. Last year, we had a bill pass and the governor signed into law in regards to this issue. So I don't bring this issue up lightly, but here's the bottom line. This bill is being brought because there's still a concern out there. And the bill that turned into law last year has not completely addressed the issue. We're still changing our clocks. And this bill, the purpose of it is to eliminate that. Let's get to where we are not changing our clocks twice a year. I have given each of you in your email a brief data sheet, and I've tried to keep the arguments minimized so that you can tell just where we're coming from on this particular issue. This really has to do with more of a medical issue than anything else. And I know that there's some criticism of why are we dealing with this issue at a time when there's so many big issues that we're dealing with in the legislature. And I'll tell you this, we are dealing with COVID-19 right now, and we have today 671 deaths in the state. And I'm here to argue that this particular issue leads to deaths as well. And the data that I provided for you will confirm that that is the situation. And that's what I'm here to argue for, is that we need to go ahead and move forward, be a leader in this issue amongst the states, much like we were when it came to voting for women's rights to vote. And so I'd like to see Wyoming be a leader. I have had constituents bring this issue to me, and since then, since I've taken up the issue and decided to advance this bill, I've also asked a lot of other people and conducted surveys, as well as read about several polls that are out there. There's polls being held continuously on this issue, and several states around us are debating the issue at the same time. So it is a concern amongst the constituents, and so I do think it's a serious issue to bring forward. In the beginning of my notes that I provided to you, I pointed out that a survey shows from 2019 that 7 out of 10 Americans are concerned about this issue and would like to see it change. So that's the smallest number. Normally it's around 90% of the people that would like to see this change. And then the debate would become, well, how do you go about changing it? So that debate was had last year, and the outcome of that debate was to put Wyoming on daylight savings time, mountain daylight savings time, year round. Well, unfortunately, federal law is not going to allow that to happen for some time. Federal law will have to change. We also put some restrictions in there that 4 states, 4 Western states, including Wyoming, would have to change their laws. Since that time, a portion of Idaho has changed, and Utah has changed. So we would need to see 2 more states change, and then the federal law change before we would ever see this happen. So we're years down the road before that's going to happen. And I would liken those changes to this. When we purchase a home on a contingency that we sell our home, and the person buying our home has to sell their home, and so on and so forth. Each of these states changes their statutes contingent on other states. And so it becomes a snowball effect, and we're a ways away from that happening. But again, it is an issue amongst our constituents, and it's something that could save lives. So I think it's an important issue. Why would it save lives? You can see a study that I provided to you from March 29th of 2014 that shows that heart attacks increased by 25% right after the changing of time. And in order to be brief, I'm just going to go right on down through these. The Journal of Applied Psychology in 2009 found that 5.7% more workplace entries occur right after the time change. And that leads to 67.6 more lost working days. So this is also a productivity issue. And then there's a February 2008 study on the Japanese Society of Sleep Research that shows results confirm that male suicide rates rise in the weeks following the commencement of daylight savings time compared to the weeks following the return to standard time and the rest of the year. And lastly, I've included a study from 2016 in the Journal of Epidemiology. And it shows that hospital admissions for depression spike at one particular time, and that's the month immediately following the changing of clocks. So with that, I'd like to go forward with going over the bill. It's a very simple bill and a very short one. The purpose of this bill, again, is to eliminate the 2 time changes that we still have, even though we passed a law last year. The first portion of here, we have a new statute, 8-4-116, and then we get right into the bill. And here's the crux of it. Under item A, it says the year-round observed time of the state of Wyoming and all of the state's political subdivisions is Mountain Standard Time. And then the next page, we have the definition, and we also have the U.S. Code 260A, which restricts us from being able to go to daylight savings time year-round. By the way, that bill, that particular code in federal law has been attempted to be changed in the past. The last time it was attempted was in 2019, and it never did come out of committee there. I have included that particular code in the materials that I provided to you. The next thing is the definition of Mountain Standard Time, which is the next part of US code, which I've also provided to you. And finally, we repeal the 2020 law that was passed last year. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Any questions for Representative Brown or Bear? I'm sorry. Any questions? Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Bear. Sorry for the little hesitation there. I was trying to read everything you had in there. So I did sign on to this as a co-sponsor, just for full disclosure on this. When Representative Bear and I had talked about the implications of the current depression rates that we're seeing within the current COVID, ongoing, pandemic. One of the attempts to try to lessen the degree of depression that we're going to see as time continues to move on, and more jobs are lost and more people have to face hard decisions in life, that this could just be one measure to reduce that level of depression that you can see when that time zone changes. Some people, you get into a rhythm and in a mood, and then all of a sudden, everything's changed and stuff like that. And it does actually affect people's clocks, quality of life and all that stuff. So I am in support of this bill. I would like to see it moved forward. It does seem almost insignificant on the surface, but when you really dig into the effects of the movement back and forth within twice a year, it actually becomes kind of a serious nature, and being able to have a part in providing a better quality of life for Wyoming residents. That's why I jumped on it. So thank you, Representative Bear, for bringing it and allowing me to be part of it.
Any questions for Representative Bear? Anyone? So Representative Bear, based on this, there'll be a portion of time in the year where someone traveling, say, from Nebraska to Nevada would change their clock in Nevada, or in Nebraska, get to the Wyoming border, change their watch again, get to the Utah border, change their watch again, get to the Nevada border, and again change their watch. Am I understanding that correctly?
Because the eastern and western portions of Nebraska have two different time zones, yeah, that would be accurate. And fortunately, we have GPS connected to our clocks nowadays, so that some of that is mitigated. We would, again, not be the first state to do this. Arizona has this already, and the Navajo Nation within Arizona is on daylight savings time like we are today. So we already see this in action south of us, and it doesn't seem to be creating any kind of issues.
Okay. Other questions for Representative Bear? Amanda, is there anyone for public testimony?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we have two individuals that I'm putting into the room right now.
Okay. Okay, Representative Ottman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Representative Bear. I'm here today to speak in favor of this, just with some experience. I'm here to testify in favor of this. For 15 years, I worked in the K-5 educational system. And one of the major things was behavior. Children, right after the time changes, if it changes to where the time is later, they want to stay up late at night, and then they come in the next day. And you think, well, that's kids. It really did make a difference. The emotional stress and strain on children, especially when it goes back and they lose that hour's worth of sleep. A lot of our kids in rural Wyoming ride on buses for 45 minutes to an hour. So they're sleeping on the bus, come into school, their core subjects are usually first thing in the morning to catch them when they're alert. And here these little guys are tired and cranky. They don't want to get up. They start falling asleep. So they start acting up with behaviors. And it's very prevalent. And not only the children, but the teachers that have to deal with them. They're staying up a little bit later, getting up, they're tired. And it really, while it doesn't seem like much, when your days are so full of requirements and you set the stage for unsuccessful events, it really does affect a lot of things. The other thing is it takes about 30 days for a habit to be made. It takes 30 days for this sleep thing to change. So then you get it changed, everybody's rolling along, and then it changes again. And it just really affects a lot. The other thing is we have children, it seems like a lot these days, that are suffering from different disabilities. And to change things for them makes a big difference. A lot of these children do not react well to change at all. And so something like this, and then having all the other behaviors around them, it really causes a lot of stress and strain. And the thing is that this isn't something that is overcome. It happens twice a year, and it happens every year. And so for 2 months out of every school year of 9 months, you have all of this struggle. Let me see. I guess pretty much that's what I had to say. I would really support this for lots of reasons, but I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon, and I would stand for any questions.
Any questions for Representative Ottman? Okay, any questions? Okay, I think up next is Mr. Moline.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. And I have to say it's nice to come to your committee and support a bill. Wyoming Farm Bureau does have policy on this. We don't care which one we go with. If it's daylight savings or daylight standard time, we just quit changing our clocks twice a year. Sometimes the argument is that people in surrounding states won't know what time it is in Wyoming. I give people more credit than that. They'll adjust. They've adjusted in Arizona with the states surrounding it. Again, my Farm Bureau member policy is to quit jacking with our clocks twice a year. Most of our clocks are old and we don't know how to set them in our pickups anymore if they work. Sitting in support of this bill. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd sit for any questions.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Moline? Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Moline.
Thank you.
Amanda, anyone else?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, with that then I will close public testimony. Committee?
Move the bill.
Moved by Baker. Seconded by Burt. Okay. Representative Brown.
I was just going to call for the question. Pretty straightforward bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, question haven't been called. Amanda, please take the roll.
Representative Baker.
Aye.
Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Burt.
Aye.
Representative Henderson.
No.
Representative McGuire.
No.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Obermueller.
No.
Representative Steivar.
Aye.
Chairman Burt Hart.
No.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 ayes, 4 noes.
Okay, thank you. And Representative Bear, you'll floor manage your bill. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, committee, we are done for the day. Anything else to be brought up? No? Okay, I guess I will see all of you next week. I think anybody not going to be there live? I'm just curious. That's your decision. Okay. So intention is we have a clear deck. We'll see what is assigned to us on Monday, and we'll plan on our usual meeting schedule upon noon recess, probably 15 minutes. I think what I've heard is there's going to be usually some sort of lunch brought in some way. So grab that and then we'll convene the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, you're talking about meeting on Tuesday, correct?
Tuesday, correct. Yes, and Thursday, our normal meeting days. So Clarissa, thank you very much for your help today. You can turn your camera back on.
Mr. Chairman, they're still having issues in the secretary room. So
Okay.
right now they don't have video or voice. So after this meeting, they'll probably call you for verbal approvals on the bills.
Okay. All right. Representative Brown, you had something? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, with that, we are adjourned, and I